bawal ang pakikipagsabwatan sa mga fixers. Sa first offense, may nakapataw na suspensyon. Sa second offense, matatanggal sa serbisyo at wala pang retirement benefits. Mamumultahan pa ng 500,000 to 2 million pesos. At makukulong hanggang 6 na taon. Kaya huwag kalimutan, alamin at sundin ang batas.
Pangarap ng batas na ito na maalis na ang red tape at korupsyon upang tuluyan ng mapabilis ang mga proseso ng gobyerno. Upang makamit ito, may dalawang landas na sabay na tatahaki ng ARTA. Nandito ang empowerment at enforcement. Una ay ang empowerment, kung saan bibigyan ng tulong at kapasidad ang mga ahensya ng gobyerno para mas streamline, ma-re-engineer at maiangat nila ang kalidad ng kanilang serbisyo. Tulad ng regulatory impact assessment, kung saan ang mga proposed na proseso ay sinisiguradong may progressive na effect. At ang regulatory management system para patuloy na maging effective, productive at efficient ang proseso ng mga ahensya sa pamamagitan ng pagsigurado na ang lahat ng ating mga regulasyon, batas at polisiya ay dumaan sa masusing pag-aaral. Pangalawa ay ang enforcement, kung saan ang mga ahensya na lalabag sa batas ng ARTA ay papatawan ng naaayon na kaparusahan. Guided by these two pillars, our gift of productivity and efficiency to the people will be just a step away. Approve ka, ARTA! Ano ginagawa mo? Fixing or dealing with fixers to gain advantage is a direct penalty. Wala nang strike, lagot ka agad! Ayaw nyo makinig sa ARTA, ha? Sige, lakad ka na! Dahil dyan, ito ang mga maaaring ipataw sa iyo. Dismissal from service, disqualification from holding public office, forfeiture of retirement benefits, imprisonment of 1 to 6 years, fine of 500,000 to 2 million pesos. That's what you get when you let the greed win. Remember, ARTA is always watching. So don't you dare, no to fixer. Pangarap ng batas na ito na maalis na ang red tape at korupsyon upang tuluyan ng mapabilis ang mga proseso ng gobyerno. Upang makamit ito, may dalawang landas na sabay na tatahaki ng ARTA. Nandito ang empowerment at enforcement. Una ay ang empowerment, kung saan bibigyan ng tulong at kapasidad ang mga ahensya ng gobyerno para mas streamline, ma-re-engineer at maiangat nila ang kalidad ng kanilang serbisyo. Tulad ng regulatory impact assessment, kung saan ang mga proposed na proseso ay sinisiguradong may progressive na effect. At ang regulatory management system para patuloy na maging effective, productive at efficient ang proseso ng mga ahensya sa pamamagitan ng pagsigurado na ang lahat ng ating mga regulasyon, batas at polisiya ay dumaan sa masusing pag-aaral. Pangalawa ay ang enforcement, kung saan ang mga ahensya na lalabag sa batas ng ARTA ay papatawan ng naaayon na kaparusahan. Guided by these two pillars, our gift of productivity and efficiency to the people will be just a step away. Approve ka, ARTA! Ano ginagawa mo? Fixing or dealing with fixers to gain advantage is a direct penalty. Wala nang strike, lagot ka agad! Ayaw nyo makinig sa ARTA, ha? Sige, lakad ka na! Dahil dyan, ito ang mga maaaring ipataw sa iyo. Dismissal from service, disqualification from holding public office, forfeiture of retirement benefits, imprisonment of 1 to 6 years, fine of 500,000 to 2 million pesos. That's what you get when you let the greed win. Remember, ARTA is always watching. So don't you dare no to fix it.
Let us all put ourselves in the holy presence of our God through this song.
Our Heavenly Father, the fount of all goodness and grace, the cause of wisdom, the source of intelligence, we welcome you, O Lord, to this auspicious gathering of your beloved, who continuously give you thanks for every opportunity to learn something new and become fruitful to the works of your creation. We humbly come to you, not because we are worthy, but because we find ourselves in need of you, who is our strength and our hope, to continue despite the challenges we face in health, prosperity, and our solidarity with one another. We pray that today's gathering, made possible by the grace of advancements in technology and social media, becomes successful in its endeavors, so we can offer it back to you as our humble offering to honor you, glorify you, and love you through our deeper connection with everyone. May we find bliss in today's session and become more productive children and co-creators of the earth. This we ask and pray through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Philippine National Anthem.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, telos ng sinakanan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinihirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagagang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinatang tulad, awit sa pagkayang minamahal. Matawad mo'y tagumpay na nagtitindig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan ang may magtitindig. Lumalang araw ng walhagin pagsinta,
Good morning, everyone. I am Ria Fernandez, the Communications Head of the Anti-Red Tape Authority's Public Relations Unit. Welcome po dito sa ating webinar organized by ARTA's Office of the Director General led by Secretary Jeremiah Belgica. We will cover various topics this morning, all aimed at future-proofing our regulatory reforms. As you can see in our slide, that is our theme for today's webinar, to ensure that all the good ones benefiting the Filipino people will be here and will last a lifetime. Please be informed that this event is being streamed live on our official Facebook page, the Anti-Red Tape Authority, as well as on the pages of the Presidential Communications Operations Office, or PCOO, and its attached agency or attached agencies of courtesy by the Radio Television Malacanang, or RTVM. You may also get fresh updates from our agency through our other platforms. For Twitter and Instagram, that's at ARTAGovPH. For YouTube and Facebook, that is Anti-Red Tape Authority. You may also visit our website at www.arta.gov.ph. So you can also join our growing Viber community. So now you will be seeing in our slide the QR code which you can scan in order to be part of our growing Viber community. From there, you will get the latest updates straight from the Anti-Red Tape Authority. We are honored to have with us distinguished speakers this morning, namely DICT Undersecretary Arnold Atienza, to be represented by Mrs. Cristina Cristobal, to discuss the Central Business Portal. Our very own ARTA Undersecretary Ernesto V. Perez, the Deputy Director General for Operations of ARTA, to delve into the regulatory management system and the first ever Philippine Good Regulatory Principles, or PGRP. We are also having DAP President Engelbert Caronan Jr., likewise former Secretary Ricardo Saludo, the founding president and CEO of CenSEI. To get us started, here is ARTA Secretary Jeremiah Belgica to deliver his special message. Sir?
Maraming salamat, Ria, to all of our distinguished speakers and guests today, to our dear friend, President Engelbert Caronan of the Development Academy of the Philippines, former Undersecretary Rick Saludo, of President of CenSEI, my colleagues from ARTA, who would also be delivering later a discussion, Yusek Ernesto Perez, at sa kinatawan po ng DICT na si Yusek Ali at Arnold Atienza at si Miss Cristina Cristobal, and to all who are in attendance today. It is a very wonderful time to again revisit the things that has to be done in our country, especially during this time of pandemic. It has always been said that the only thing that does not change in our world is change itself. Ang isang bagay lamang daw po na hindi ho nagbabago ay ang katotohanan na ang mga bagay ay magbabago. Now this could be sort of a cliche. However, in a position and in a work like in a public office that you and I are serving right now, we have been pushing through the leadership of our once-in-a-lifetime transformational leader, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, key reforms that our nation has never seen before. Personally, I could speak for ARTA na napakarami po sa mga bagay na itinutulak po ng aming ahensya ay mga bagay na sa maraming panahon ay hindi napangyayari sa ibang mga administrasyon, subalit sa mga panahon ngayon ay naging posible because of several things. First is the passage of the Ease of Doing Business law, or the new ARTA law, the creation of an institution such as the Anti-Red Tape Authority, the creation of a support institution such as the EODB Art Council, Advisory Council, and also the Oversight Committee, Joint Congressional Oversight Committee, and the many other issuances that has come after this law, just to show the commitment of this administration in streamlining government services and making things that used to be hard or even impossible to be possible. Ilan ho ito sa mga bagay na ginawa po ng ating Pangulo, ng ating administrasyon upang lamang masiguro na meron mangyayaring mga reforma na hinahangad ng taong bayan. But again, going back to my first premise, how do we guard ourselves against negative change? Meaning, against the fact that we could simply slip back to our former practice and just put to waste all of the reforms that you and I in government have been doing. Now, this is the question that we are seeking to give clarification through this webinar. Future-proofing regulatory reforms. Sa akin hong palagay ay meron hong 4 na bagay. There are 4 things that I would say that could actually help us to future-proof the reforms that we have been pushing for quite some time now. First is the letter A, which is to have a clear architectural plan or a vision. Without vision, my people perish, the Holy Scripture says. Kung wala hong malinaw na pangitain, walang marinaw na roadmap, hindi ho natin magagawa ang atin pong regulatory reform. More so, no regulatory reform will ever survive the changes of the future. Having a clear vision and architectural plan is a must. Thus, today we will be hearing a discussion by Undersecretary Ernesto Perez regarding the efforts of our country towards the institutionalization of the regulatory management system. The regulatory management system is the general idea and the goal that ARTA has been pushing for subtly in order to institutionalize good practices and good policies, and capacitating government agencies to be able to self-assess themselves. Today, we're proud to say that the Philippines is graduating from a beginner or starter stage into an enabled stage by the end of the year. Also, we would also be discussing today about the first ever Philippine Good Regulatory Principles, or the PGRP. The PGRP is a set of principles or codes that would serve as a reminder to all regulatory agencies and regulators not to be over-regulators, but to be developmental partners of the institutions and the people that they are seeking to help. After having a clear architectural plan of a vision, another important step towards future-proofing is having a well-written regulatory policy. Sinabi nga ang anumang mga bagay na hindi nakasulat ay maaari hong malimutan. We need to put it in paper. If ever we need to set it in stone. We have to train as much and as many people as possible with this new mindset, with this new architectural plan, with the vision that we would want to see, and put it out there. And that is the reason why we have in our midst, and later we would be hearing more about the Development Academy of the Philippines from the President himself, President Engelbert Caronan, who are the experts in the field of regulatory reforms and regulatory management when it comes to our government. He will be speaking more about future-proofing and also how we could write down the regulatory reforms as a policy na hindi lamang po subject sa whims and caprices ng bawat leader na darating. Also, when we talk about future-proofing, hindi ho natin matatanggal sa usapin ang teknolohiya. Using technology in order for us to solidify the gains that we are now having and we are pushing is not only desirable but necessary. In the recent months, several government agencies, through the initiative of ARTA and DICT, have come together to put up and to push and to realize a once-in-a-lifetime dream that we have, which is coming up with a single portal that would allow Filipinos to register their businesses from SEC, BIR, SSS, PhilHealth, Pag-ibig to the local government units in less than 1 day. This is the vision of the Central Business Portal. Na at the beginning of this year, we have rolled out together with DICT and the other government agencies. And as we speak, we are envisioning that by the end of this year, most of the key local government units, including DTI and CDA, will already be part of this wonderful project of the Central Business Portal. Para hindi na ho pumupunta kung saan-saan ang taong bayan para magrehistro ng kanilang pong negosyo sa pamamagitan lamang po ng kanilang internet, ng kanilang laptop, and eventually ng kanilang cellphone, magagawa po natin ang mga bagay na ito. And lastly, future-proofing. Regulatory reforms would entail for advocacy champions to continue our battle, our cry, our vision, the architectural vision, the regulatory policies that were written, the technology that were established, and these advocacy champions would continue to speak and to tell about the good things that we are seeking to accomplish. And they would continue from the private sector, also advocacy champions within government agencies. Kinakailangan po natin ituloy ang laban sa pamamagitan ng atin pong mga kasamahan na magpapatuloy. As a young man, I remember hearing one of my mentors tell me, whoever captures the dreams of the young will have before him the future. Kung sino man ang makakakuha ng isip at puso ng mga kabataan, siya po ang makakakuha ng ating kinahaharap at kinabukasan. In the same way, I do believe that future-proofing the regulatory reforms is a battle for the dreams and aspirations of the Filipino people. That is why it is important for us to be reminded that the 4 things that I mentioned could be summarized into what we call ARTA. This is our small contribution po sa bawat isa sa atin. Sa malapit na po na pagtatapos ng ng administrasyon ng ating Pangulo, ituloy po natin ang pagbabago, ituloy po natin ang laban. Sa pangunguna ho ng ating Pangulo, ng ating pong mga leaders sa mga departamento na inyo pong kinabibilangan, at ganoon na rin po sa ating mga advocacy champions, what we call the ARTA champions, the ARTA volunteers from the private sectors who are here. We thank you. Wag ho tayong panghinaan dahil we know, and I do believe from the depths of my heart, that the best days are ahead of us. Muli, I would want to say and remind us ang trend ng pagbabago laban sa red tape ay tumatakbo na po at pabilis ng pabilis. Ang sino man pong humarang dito ay tiyak na masasagasaan. Marami pong salamat, stay safe, and let us enjoy today's webinar.
Maraming salamat po, Secretary Jeremiah B. Belgica, the Director General of the Anti-Red Tape Authority, and the one who led us to this webinar. Maraming salamat po, Sec Belgica. Last July 26, in his sixth and final State of the Nation address, President Rodrigo Duterte presented the Central Business Portal, or CBP, as one of his administration's accomplishments. Hence, he wished succeeding leaders of this country would continue implementing the online platform designed to cater to registering businesses. Our speaker, who is a longtime public servant, will be sharing with us development with CBP and why it is a must to stay even after the president's term. However, our speaker will not make it today due to personal reasons. Hence, he sent Mrs. Cristina Cristobal, the project management lead of CBP, to speak on behalf of Undersecretary Arnold I. Atienza, or Yusek Ali, of the Department of Information and Communications Technology. Once again, here is Mrs. Cristina Cristobal. Ma'am?
Thank you, Ria. Good morning to the distinguished guest of this special event. So is someone be able to present the slide I forwarded?
Ma'am, can you see now your slide? Ma'am Christina, hello?
Hello, good morning
Yes, ma'am.
again. I can
Yes,
see it now.
All right, ma'am.
So, in behalf of the ICT, we are privileged to work with the distinguished DG Belgica in propelling the Central Business Portal to reality. So, in partnership with SEC, DTI, BIR, and our social security agencies, that's PhilHealth, Pag-ibig, and SSS, with Quezon City as our pilot LGU, and FDA as our pilot secondary agencies. We are proudly presenting an overview of the Central Business Portal. Next slide, please. We shall have the Central Business Portal rationale and later go through the project implementation, and lastly on the CBP high-level design features and roadmap. Next slide, please. So the rationale behind CBP is the Republic Act 11032, which is the Ease of Doing Business Act of 2018, wherein the ICT has been mandated to create a central business portal. Next slide, please. Which should provide convenience, efficiency, and transparency. This is being developed by the ICT in coordination with our partner agencies, wherein we would like to bring convenience through the online portal, efficiency through the unified form, wherein one-time capture of data at the primary registration agency will already provide inputs to the next agencies. Moreover, there are also chances of having the application being processed at the same time. Lastly, on the side of transparency, we also provide the CBP dashboard wherein the applicant can view the status at every stage in each of the participating agency. Next slide, please. As per Section 13 of the EODB law, the CBP will serve as the central system that will receive application, capture application data involving business-related transactions. That includes our primary agencies such as SEC, DTI, and CDA, or Cooperative Development Authority. Also of the secondary licenses such as the FBA, BSP, and the rest of the agencies, which ARTA is helping us meet so that we'll be able to see the readiness of their applications to integrate with CBP. And lastly, on the business clearances, permit certifications, authorizations by LGU particularly. Next slide, please. So what the project implementation approach is to have an end-to-end primary registration agencies focus on the business sector, wherein the Filipino citizens who are starting a business can have this system end-to-end, or they can apply end-to-end online. Next slide, please. So for the CBP high-level design, we look at it from this perspective, wherein through the unified form, which captures the application and a single sign-on, these are already available in CBP. We are able to go through steps 1 to 4 of starting a business. So for step 1, we'll have the business entity registration, wherein an applicant will be able to register either through SEC, DTI, or CDA, wherein if it's required for them to be able to have their PIN number validated, such as those with DTI, this will be fully integrated. And then the step 3, which can side by side be processed with step 4, they'll be able to apply for the business permit as well as the license to operate, initially only with DTI, with the Food and Drug Administration. So moving forward, we would like to see an e-payment facility and courier facility to be able to be integrated with the CBP. As you can see at the top level, we are also looking at the Philippine Business Data Bank as having direct interface with CBP. This will be the source of validation and verifications of the NGA or national government agencies and LGUs in their processing of application. Next slide, please. So what has been the milestones for Central Business Portal? So in 2020, we were able, ARTA was with the rest of the agencies without FDA and LGU, we were able to launch the first National Business One-Stop Shop at the PICC. However, due to the pandemic, this was temporarily discontinued. But in August 28, 2020, the CBP went on an online go live through beta testing with law firms and accounting firms. This allows these participating law firms and accounting firms to use the live production application of CBP to register their business. And then in November 2020, that was a time when we were able to connect to FDA and also have the downloadable BIR certificate of registration, as well as a Social Security Unified Employee Reporting System. So finally, this year in January 2021, CBP was nationally launched. And this launch includes already the IBPLS, or the Integrated Business Business Permits and Licensing System integration with 16 LGUs using our IBPLS. Quezon City was also fully integrated with the DICT CBP, and the hyperlink to Parañaque was also provided. During this national launch, the PBRIS version 1 was also provided at the launching page of the CBP. Next slide, please. So for the features, an authorized representative or even the owner will have the facility to create an account. And through this account, there should be the dashboard to monitor the status of his or her application with each participating agency. So if ever they have lodged the application with SEC and it is being reviewed, the applicant can be updated that it is under SEC review. So if it is already with the LGU and it is in step 4, the dashboard will be providing the applicant with the current status, which is under review. So for the unified application form, this allows the one-time capture of the information or the common information to be transmitted to the next agencies. So for the SEC, that will be the first time capture. With the required information, the BIR process will only require the answering of the tax type questionnaires. There's no more double data encoding from their end. And the same thing for social security agencies. The TIN number and the certificate or the number for the COI of SEC will automatically be given or provided to the SSS, Pag-ibig, and PhilHealth. Thus, in one step, the TIN, the employer numbers, are being generated by the time the applicant has submitted its tax type questionnaire. Similarly, for the secondary permitting pilot agencies like FPA, only additional information will be captured. And then the COI from SEC will also be provided to FDA. So for the LGU, only additional information will be provided by the applicant. So only LGU specific information will be required. Thus, it will ensure the accurate capture of information at every step without putting additional effort from the side of the applicant. Next slide, please. So once they are approved, the generation of the BIR COR is already done at the CBP, including the generation of the license to operate. Likewise, the LGU's business permit for those that are fully integrated with CBP can be downloaded. So the applicant has also the option to report its first set of employees one time. So they will just have to provide the employer number and the list of employees, and it will be done in one step for the 3 social security agencies. Meanwhile, while the ARTA is pushing all the LGUs to implement the electronic business one-stop shop, the CBP is supporting ARTAs in this endeavor by making sure that while they are not ready yet, if some LGUs are not ready yet to have their systems fully integrate with CBP, we are also providing hyperlinks to these LGUs, wherein business permit applicant is redirected to the LGU website for permits application. However, this is just auto redirection to the URL and will require the applicant to enter all information required by the LGU system. Lastly, as we have said, the assignment of TIN and employer numbers is done in just one step. So just to summarize, next step, next slide, please. So authorized representatives or business owners' facility to create CBP account will redound to an application status dashboard. So the unified application form that allows one-time capture of info will allow the automatic transmission of common information that will auto-populate systems of participating agencies. Next slide. So assignment of TIN and employer number is done in one step. And then the integration with BIR Online is also available. Thus, the generation of the COR with QR code is done via CBP. Same with FDA and LGU that are fully integrated. They can generate both the business permit and the license to operate. So as I have said, hyperlink to about 300 LGU's URLs have already been provided as of August. So lastly, the link to the Philippine Business Regulations Information System is already present in the CBP. So next slide, please. So this is a joint project of the following agencies: DICT, SEC, DIR, the Department of Finance, PhilHealth, ARTA, DTI-SSS, Pag-ibig, FDA, and Quezon City. Just to conclude, the technology will remain to be the enabler, but not the driver for government transformation. Future proofing of reforms will depend on the policies, but CBP team is ready to continuously enhance the CBP to be able to support the ARTA's initiative to further improve and ease the doing business in the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was a brief but insightful presentation from Ms. Christy Cristobal. Again, that was Mrs. Cristina Cristobal, the project management lead for the Central Business Portal. She represented Undersecretary Arnold I. Atienza, or USEC Ali, of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, or DICT. Again, Ma'am Christy, maraming salamat po for your time and for your presentation. Now, moving forward, our second resource speaker comes from our very own office, the Anti-Red Tape Authority. He is our Deputy Director General for Operations. Let us all welcome USEC Ernesto V. Perez to provide us the valuable insights and details about regulatory management system and the first ever Philippine Good Regulatory Principles, or PGRP, which we just launched recently. Again, here is USEC Ernesto V. Perez.
Maraming salamat, Ria. Magandang umaga, Pilipinas. Magandang umaga, mga kababayan. Isang malaking karangalan sa akin na maging bahagi ng pagpupulong na ito upang maibabahagi ng Anti-Red Tape Authority ang kanyang mga initiatives, programs, and practices towards a good regulatory management system, and also the recently launched Philippine Good Regulatory Principles, establishing foundations for regulatory management in the Philippines. The presentation will be done as follows. First, may I request, there will be a presentation or an overview of the regulatory environment in the Philippines. Then in a nutshell, Republic Act 11032, or the Ease of Doing Business and Efficient Delivery of Services Law, which created the Anti-Red Tape Authority under the Office of the President. We will also discuss the relevant projects and activities being undertaken by the Anti-Red Tape Authority in collaboration with other agencies and its development partners. As a highlight of the presentation, we will also give audiovisual presentation of the Philippine Good Regulatory Principles, and then the future plans as well. In a study conducted by Intel and Gill in 2016, it placed the Philippines in the 80s together with Thailand, Indonesia, in New Zealand in a starter stage under the classification of countries according to regulatory management system stage. And then in the 90s, countries like Malaysia, Japan, Vietnam, and New Zealand advanced to the enabled stage. In the 2000, Korea, Malaysia, Japan, and New Zealand further advanced to the practice stage, while Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand and Korea went up to the highest level of RMS, which is the embedded stage. Unfortunately, the Philippines continue to be in the starter stage. In an analysis in a study conducted by Dr. Gilbert Lianto in 2015, it sought to analyze the situation as to why the Philippines has remained in the starter stage. He opined and he believed that because there is no formal regulatory management system in the Philippines, while we have the four basic elements of an RMS, they do not necessarily represent the integral parts of a coherent and coordinated regulatory management system. And also, there is no strong central oversight body or institutional mechanism that would systematically coordinate, check for consistency, and review efforts on new regulations or amendments to existing regulations contemplated by different regulators and is accountable for promoting a whole of government regulatory reform. Next slide. So, under the Philippine Development Plan of in the current administration for the year 2017-2022, particularly Chapter 5, it envisioned a strong, people-centered, clean, and efficient governance and develop an overarching national regulatory architecture and institutionalized regulatory impact assessment. And then on Chapter 16, leveling the playing field through a national competition policy where it aims to institutionalize a regulatory management system to monitor impact, ensure cohesiveness, and improve the quality and flexibility of government regulatory frameworks. So the President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, in his first State of the Nation address on July 26, 2016, he emphasized the need to ensure reforms, to ensure competitiveness and ease of doing business in the country. So less than 2 years from that State of the Nation address, our legislators crossed party lines and enacted with the President signing on May 28, 2018, the Ease of Doing Business or Efficient Delivery of Government Services Law or Republic Act 11032. 15 days from its publication, the law became effective on June 17, 2020. And I was fortunate to have been appointed by the President and assume office as the first employee or the first Undersecretary or Director General of the Anti-Red Tape Authority with the mandate to lay the groundworks, meaning the preparation of the budget, the preparation of the organizational structure, as well as the implementing rules and regulations, so that when the first Director General, Secretary Jeremiah Belgica, assumed office on July 9, 2019, barely a week thereafter, and of course after a series of consultations before that, he signed the implementing rules and regulations of the law, together with the chairman of the Civil Service Commission and the Secretary of the Department of Trade and Industry as mandated by law. So 15 days from the um, publication of the implementing rules and regulations, it became effective on August 4, 2019. And so starts all the major initiatives and programs that the ARTA Red Tape Authority, starting with the 26 staff from the DTI Competitiveness Bureau, because under the law, the Competitiveness Bureau of the Department of Trade and Industry acted as the secretariat and supported the creation and the operationalization of the Anti-Red Tape Authority with until the appointment of the Director General and the issuance of the implementing rules and regulations. Republic Act 11032, particularly on promoting good regulatory practices, can be viewed, as you can see from the screen, under three basic features, meaning the review of proposed major regulations using regulatory impact analysis, and then conducting regulatory management training programs, and the repeal of outdated, redundant, and burdensome existing regulations. So the Anti-Red Tape Authority, created under the Office of the President, has the following powers and functions. First, on the capacitating and enabling side of the Anti-Red Tape Authority under the operations group, and which is particularly relevant to this presentation, among the powers and functions of which are the following: to recommend policies, processes, and systems to improve regulatory management, to increase productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness of business permitting and licensing agencies; to review proposed major regulations of government agencies using submitted regulatory impact assessment subject to proportionality rules; conduct regulatory management training programs to capacitate national government agencies and local government units to comply with sound regulatory practices; and to ensure the dissemination of and public access to information on regulatory management system and changes and laws and regulations relevant to the public by establishing the Philippine Business Regulation System. That is the capacitating and enabling side of ARTA. The enforcement and investigating powers of ARTA is with the legal department of the Anti-Red Tape Authority. As you can see from the screen, the issue doing business law provided the bedrock for the establishment of a formal regulatory management system, with the policy being set by Republic Act 11032. And the Anti-Red Tape Authority, created by said law under the Office of the President, becomes the central oversight body, where, as part of its mandate, is empowered or given the following tools and procedures, meaning to conduct ex post evaluation and simplification, public consultation, and regulatory impact analysis, which are the basic elements of what a regulation should be issued and implemented by trade or regulatory agencies. In brief, or an overview, can see how an effective regulatory management system should be by complying with certain basic requisites in order to establish, coordinate, and operationalize the different elements into an RMS. So from the agency level, there should be connectivity within the agency level to be guided by a specific, clear policy issue. And then after having been guided by that policy issue, it considers several policy options. And then it conducts design, regulation, and of course, through proper consultation, to issue and then implement. And after implementation and enforcement, there should be monitoring and evaluation. Expanding that, to involve all the other agencies, meaning interconnectivity among agencies, because under the law, no agency should be operating in silo, meaning that its programs and regulations should also be aligned with those of the other agencies. So the same guidance, uh, there should be a clear policy, a regulatory policy. There should be forward planning. There should be coordination among government agencies, and of course, the mandatory public consultations that should be incorporated in a regular impact assessment to be to be reduced into a written document, which we call the regulatory impact statement, to be submitted to the anti-red tape authority as the central oversight body, which after due consultations and deliberations will determine whether the particular regulation submitted to it complies with the basic requirements of a regulatory management system, and whether to approve or disapprove the same, or to recommend what need to be improved should there be finding of some deficiencies of that particular regulation. Next slide. The Anti-Red Tape Authority, particularly under the operations group, has for its office the Better Regulations Office, dedicated to ensure that it will really constitute the oversight body. And in particular, it has several divisions under it. First, the Regulatory Management Training Division, the main task of which is to conduct regulatory management training programs to capacitate NGAs and LGUs to comply with sound regulatory practices. And then also it prepare, so in consultation with the proper government agencies, together with our other divisions at the Better Regulations Office, regulatory management manuals for all government agencies and or instrumentalities. As we speak, the manual is already being finalized and to be launched soon with the assistance of the U.S. Agency for International Development and the UP Public Administration uh, governance through its the USAID regulatory reforms for national development. The Better Regulations Office has four divisions clustered and patterned after our cabinet clusters. The Division A, in particular, handles uh, the socio-economic development. No? So it will prepare in consultation with the appropriate agencies the RIO manual for all government agencies and instrumentalities. It will also recommend policies, processes, and systems to improve regulatory management, increase the productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness of business permitting and licensing agencies. And very particular, very important to its function is to review proposed major regulations of government agencies using submitted regulatory impact assessments subject to proportionality rules. And last but certainly not the least, to ensure the dissemination of and public access to information on regulatory management system and changes in laws and regulations relevant to the public by establishing the Philippine Business Regulations Information System, or PBRIS, which I shall discuss later on in details. So here in a nutshell, we report to you the various collaborations being done by the Anti-Red Tape Authority with its development partners and international counterparts, including, of course, the U.S. Agency for International Development, partnership with its UPPAC, Respond, headed by Dr. Henry Basilio, and with its team leader, Dr. Gilbert Lianto. We have also collaborated with the United Kingdom government, particularly through its Department of for Business, Energy, and Industrial Strategy, where with the support of its consultants, we conducted various consultation training and trainings, and we were able to craft and finalize the GPRPs, or 10 good regulatory principles, as well as the whole of government re-engineering manual. We have also collaborated, of course, continuously with the World Bank IFC group, and also with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries. Of course, we have also collaborated with our neighboring country, the Malaysia, where it sponsored our trip to Malaysia with the Malaysian Productivity Corporation, where we were able to witness how Malaysia uh, conducts its RMS and why it has advanced its RMS to much improved stage. Next slide. Uh, the Anti-Red Tape Authority is on continuing capacity building on regulatory management for government agencies. Starting in 2019, where it conducted basic training for priority agencies, particularly 44 agencies and 223 government personnel. In 2020, it conducted an executive seminar on RMS and RIA uh, with the support of the United Kingdom government, training on better regulations. For 2021 up to 2022, it has finalized the National Regulatory Impact Assessment Manual, which will be launched soon. This has been arrived at after due consultations and collaboration and support of the U.S. Agency for International Development and the UP Public Administration Group on and Governance. And we have conducted trainings, basic and advanced training, of course, with the support, collaboration, and assistance of our partners from the the Philippines, where we are able to conduct not only basic training but also advanced training, and that agencies have already graduated, and they were able to submit their regulatory impact statement to the panel of experts from the Development Academy of the Philippines and from the Anti-Red Tape Authority, where we made revision suggestions, and in due time they will submit to us the revised RAS. And as we speak, we are also conducting trainings on RIA with the University of the Philippines Public Administration and Governance, and of course with the help and support of the U.S. Agency for International Development, UPPAC Respond. Beyond 2022, we will expand the training to other regulatory management, regulatory agencies. Next slide. We are on continuing capacity building, not only for other agencies, but also for its young, dedicated, and committed staff. Through training conducted on October, of course, October 14 to 16 in 2019. It also conducted capacity building of its ARTA staff on December 2 to 4, 2019. And then traffic light score methodology training sponsored by the Development Academy of the Philippines through, and of course, the regulatory cost model training and ARTA, of course, pilot test on the RIA manual from March to August 2021. Sometime this September or next month, we will also be officially launching the RIA manual, which has already been undergone pilot testing and continuing pilot testing with the relevant government agencies. So as you can see from the screen, the Anti-Red Tape Authority has issued various circulars, starting with the memorandum circular on the creation of a committee on Anti-Red Tape Authority by all covered agencies, so that all the reforms, initiatives, and programs in implementation of the law will be cascaded to the Committee on Anti-Red Tape Authority, which is required by law and by implementing rules for all agencies to create, so that the training, implementation of all these programs will be cascaded through this Committee on Anti-Red Tape Authority, Committee on Anti-Red Tape by the government agencies. It has also launched, after it has been endorsed by the Ease of Doing Business Anti-Red Tape Advisory Council last June 25, 2021, chaired by the Secretary of Trade and Industry and vice-chaired by the Director General of Anti-Red Tape Authority, with members, the Secretaries of Finance, Secretaries of the DILG, Secretary of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, and 2 private sector representatives. So this will be a part of our presentation this morning, the Philippine Good Regulatory Principles. Now, we will also, we are in the process of drafting, and soon we'll issue the memorandum circular on the pilot implementation of RIA. While we have already conducted the training, we will formalize, according to our Director General, it's really better that we reduce into writing all the initiatives that we have. And we will also then issue the circular on the national policy on regulatory management system. Next slide. With the release of the memorandum circular on implementation of RMS and pilot RIA, it will aim to notify all regulatory agencies on the pilot implementation of RIA. It will also provide a prescriptive period and process on regulations issued post Republic Act 11032, but prior to the release and implementation of the final ARTA RIA manual. It will also require agencies to submit information needed for the national policy on regulatory management system, where sectors being regulated following the 2029 Philippine Standard for Industry Classification, and then regulatory agencies offices assigned to each sector and its legal basis, and the policy development process. So for the first phase, or 2021, on the release of memorandum circular on that will be the implementation of RMS and pilot RIA, and then, of course, the development of the Philippine Business Regulations Information System, or PIBRIS, and then RIA pilot implementation, all happening in 2021 under phase 1. Next slide. So for the RIA manual and training that we have so far conducted, this has been co-developed. We have co-developed the Philippine National Regulatory Impact Assessment Manual and its training modules with, as I mentioned earlier, UP Respond and the CPED from 2019 to 2021. Of course, this is through the able support and collaboration of the USA, the party chair, Dr. Henry Basilio, and its team leader, Dr. Gilbert Lianto. As we speak, we are undergoing pilot implementation with the Philippine GRP and will be finalized by late 2021. I mean, this manual will be launched and then finalized until late 2021. Next slide. So the RIA pilot implementation using ARTA RIA manual, GRP, and training modules. So for its initial implementation, a simplified methodology will be utilized for selected government agencies. The methodology and scope will be gradually expanded as ARTA and government agencies are capacitated and become experienced in the conduct of regulatory impact assessment. Then ARTA will be issuing the information guidance document, which shall provide the pilot regulatory process between ARTA and the agencies. The manual will provide the detail and other essential tools on how to conduct RIA. So this is our timeline, no, for pilot implementation. This is really how we do things in the Anti-Red Tape Authority. We provide the objective, we provide the output, and of course the timeline for implementation. So under the preparatory stage, this is done January to March 2021. Piloting, this is ongoing from April, starting in April 2021 towards the end of November and maybe early December 2021. So by 2022 onwards, we shall be able to really mainstream or operationalize the manual. Next slide. So here is the Philippine Business Regulations Information System in a nutshell. ARTA, with the technical assistance from the UPPAF respond, is developing the PBRIS, or the Philippine Business Regulation Information System, which is a web-based platform providing accessible information on the Philippine regulatory management system and the laws and regulations relevant to the public. Next slide. As you can see from the next slide, this is how the Philippine Business Regulation Information System is conducted. First, by identifying the 27 participating priority agencies, critical agencies that really provide basic frontline services to the people in terms of issuances of business permits and licensing to the applicants and to the public as well. So after identifying the 27 participating agencies, next slide please. This is how the next slide. This is how the Philippine Business Regulations and Information System is envisioned to be developed and implemented. It will enable agencies to upload structured existing regulations, upload and processing of structured proposed regulations and regulatory impact. So not only existing regulations, but also proposed regulations and regulatory impact assessment. It will also have the ability to tag and categorize regulations per sector on a per case-to-case and locality. It will also allow for public commenting of proposed and existing regulations subject to consultations through registered accounts. It will also have the feature of notification of users on proposed and existing regulations through registered accounts. Finally, and but certainly not the least, it will be able to report, will have report generation. But ultimately, the objective really is to interconnect government agencies and that regulations must be harmonized and aligned with other agencies where the public and even not only the public, not only the government agencies, but even the public will have access to this system. Now, one um, if we consider the flagship program of the Anti-Red Tape Authority, initiated no less by our Director General Jeremiah Belgica, approved no less by the President during its cabinet meeting in the evening of March 4, 2020. It approved the program which we call Program Nehemiah, or the national effort for the harmonization of efficient measures of interrelated agents, which is really inspired by the book of Nehemiah in the Old Testament, where the goal is to reduce by 52% the time and the cost and the requirements or procedures within 52 weeks for the key sectors of society. We have identified the 5 sectors through the support and assistance of the Development Academy of the Philippines, and we have identified this to be one on the connectivity, meaning telco, then housing and construction, food and pharma, power and energy, and the logistics sector. As we speak, we have already issued guidelines on the revised guidelines for telco, and we have received commendations, appreciation for the various telecommunications agencies expressing their appreciation for the reduction of the number of documents and expediting the processing of permits, especially at this time where connectivity is very important, very strategic, because everybody needs a strong internet connection. Next slide. You can see there for the 5 sectors, we have thought and studied and started to implement the reduction in the number of steps, the reduction of the number of documents to be submitted, of course, following the standard processing time of 3720 mandated by the Ease of Doing Business law for all government agencies to process applications and permits within that standard processing time. ARTA also conducted, in coordination with relevant government agencies and stakeholders, for selected government agencies to review existing regulations which have been the subject of complaints or concerns by stakeholders, particularly regulations issued and being implemented by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, particularly its Environment Management Bureau or EMB, the Food and Drug Administration with respect to the issuance of license to operate on certain food and pharma items, the Philippine Ports Authority, the Department of Public Works and Highways, and the DSUD, or the Department of Socialized Housing and Urban Development. Next slide. So, this is how we were able to come up with the Philippine Good Regulatory Principles, starting with the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding on February 4, 2020, with the Ambassador of UK and the Director General of the Anti-Red Tape Authority signing said Memorandum of Understanding. And of course, the Memorandum of Understanding provided for the collaborative effort among the Anti-Red Tape Authority, the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and the UK Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And then also the PGRP benchmark with the set of principles being adopted also by ASEAN countries and the OECD countries or versus economic regulatory code of the United Kingdom. Next slide. All right. For your better appreciation, the Anti-Red Tape Authority, through its staff, able and competent staff, young and dedicated Carl Cosalim, and then of the Better Regulations Office, and Thea Abisanes of the Public Relations Office unit, has come up with this audiovisual presentation of the 10 Philippine Good Regulatory Principles. Please watch.
The Philippine Good Regulatory Principles, or PGRP, are a set of principles outlining good regulatory practices. Government agencies can align their regulatory processes and activities using the PGRP. We aim to have regulators that are able to create and adopt regulations that do not add undue regulatory burden to the transacting public. The Anti-Red Tape Authority, or ARTA, in accordance with its mandates as prescribed under Republic Act 11032, will promote these principles so that businesses and regulated entities understand what they can expect from regulators. Let's learn the principles together. Principle 1. Clarity. Regulators should provide clear rationale, objectives, goals, institutional frameworks, and support mechanisms in the regulations they issue. Principle 2. Legal and empirical basis. Regulators should ensure that all regulations come from sound legal and empirical basis which validate new or continuing government intervention. Principle 3. Cost versus benefit. Regulators should issue regulations that benefit society, justify costs, reduce unintended effects, and minimize negative impact to the economy, society, and the environment. Meanwhile, in Principle 4, Assessment, regulators should assess and consider all policy options, including non-regulatory interventions, through regulatory impact assessment. Principle 5, Engagement. Regulators should practice and sustain effective and inclusive stakeholder engagement. Principle 6, Coherence. Regulators should align regulations with existing regulations, ensuring consistency and congruence. Then we have Principle 7, Whole of Government. Regulators across all levels should cooperate, collaborate, and support regulatory capacity development initiatives. Of course, we can't forget Principle 8, Continuous Evaluation. Regulators should review and evaluate regulations to determine continued relevance, efficiency, and effectiveness. In Principle 9, Competition. Regulators must ensure that regulations are compatible with competition and with principles on trade and investment facilitation on both domestic and international levels. Last but not the least, Principle 10, Risk Management. Regulators should undertake risk management in drafting and implementing regulations. Through these 10 principles, we envision an efficient Philippine government that provides world-class service to the Filipino people. Together, we can create that bright future. For more information, you may visit the ARTA website at arta.gov.ph and download the Philippine Good Regulatory Principles.
So thank you once again, Carl and Thea, and I hope that you enjoyed, as I did, watching the audiovisual presentation as a break. So let me continue with my presentation. This will now summarize our national policy on regulatory management system. As you can see from the screen, we have a regulatory policy. We have an ex ante and ex post assessment. We provide for ex post assessment, and then we conduct review of regulatory institutions, forward planning, and government coordination, aided by the Philippine Good Regulatory Principles, or guided by the same, and then with the regulatory impact assessment manual and training modules as guide. Then we also institutionalize post-implementation review, assessment process and manual, and then provisions on sunsetting, one in one out stack flow linkage, and embedded reviews. We will also conduct National Regulatory Summit, National Regulatory Agenda, and annual regulatory plans towards a better and improved uh, Philippine business regulation information system, and then have a regulatory management faculty network with all the RMS elements incorporated in training modules. With all of this captured in this screen, we do hope a much improved regulatory management system. Next slide. So this is how RIA is to be conducted. As you can see from the screen, if the regulation or the agency intends to regulate, it is encouraged to conduct a preliminary impact assessment, and then to submit a preliminary impact statement to the Anti-Red Tape Authority for review. Now, if a particular regulation is not considered major or is exempted, then the regulation goes to the agency concerned for enactment, and then of course through proper consultation process. After enactment, it implements the same, subject of course to the usual monitoring and coordinating. But if the particular regulation is a major regulation as provided for by law, it is, and it's implementing rules and regulations, that agency is mandated, required to subject the regulation to a regulatory impact statement, of course, through proper consultation, and submit to the Anti-Red Tape Authority Better Regulations Office a regulatory impact statement, which is a which is a written document that will document and proves that the subject regulation has been subjected to RIA. And of course, it goes without saying that that regulation must be subjected to proper public consultation involving all stakeholders concerned. And after that, it will submit the RIS or Regulatory Impact Statement to the Anti-Red Tape Authority for review, for scrutiny, and after a determination whether approve or disapprove, if it is approved, then it goes back to the agency for implementation. If it is disapproved, the Better Regulations Office will tell or advise the agency concerned what are the deficiencies or what are the provisions that need further revision. And then it will require the agency to resubmit the revised RIS. And then after its approval by the Anti-Red Authority as the central oversight body, it returns the regulations to the particular agency for implementation. Of course, the overall objective of this is to ensure that the regulation concerned has been subjected to RIA, meaning that it does not cause undue burden and cause not only to the agency concerned, but even the stakeholder or the participating public. So next slide, please. So here goes. With hopefully, we are very optimistic that with the mandate provided by law and the initiatives and programs that we are conducting in collaboration with other agencies and development partners, 2021, we shall have been able to improve our RMS stage from a poor starter stage to an enabled stage. And towards the year 2022, we shall be classified together with advanced countries like Korea, Malaysia, Japan, and New Zealand into a practice stage until we achieve that dream of being considered an embedded state. I'm really very optimistic that with the support of young, idealistic, competent um, uh, staff of the Anti-Red Tape, officers and staff of the Anti-Red Tape, with the full cooperation of government agencies like the ICT, the IRG, and too many to mention, as well as the private stakeholders who have been going to ARTA, airing their complaints, airing the concerns regarding how certain agencies are able to issue and implement those regulations. By God's grace, our dream of having an embedded RMS stage towards a much better Philippines, providing the right regulatory environment that will provide or attract investors, provide the infrastructure that will enable business to be established in the country, providing more income and business opportunities for our country and people. Next slide. Dito na po magtatapos ang aking presentasyon. Maraming salamat po sa panahon na inyong binigay. Sana po ang Anti-Red Tape Authority ay nakapagbigay sa inyo ng karapatang impormasyon tungkol sa kanyang mga ginagawang initiatives at programs. Maraming salamat po. I now turn over the floor to our beautiful lovely Ria Fernandez.
Thank you, Yusek. That was a nice and creative PowerPoint and video presentation. So trivia lang, no? Yung nag-voice over si Yusek Nestin yun. So thank you so much, Undersecretary Ernesto V. Perez, the Deputy Director General for Operations of the Anti-Red Tape Authority. He just presented details about regulatory management system and Philippine good regulatory principles. Moving forward to our next speaker, our speaker has an extensive background in the academe and public service. He will be presenting more about future-proofing regulations from their perspective. So, ladies and gentlemen, the 9th President and CEO of the Development Academy of the Philippines, who is a proud Cagayan native. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Attorney Engelbert C. Caronan Jr. Sir Jojo?
Yes, good morning to each and everyone. I'm Engelbert Caronan from the Development Academy of the Philippines, and today I'm tasked to talk on the topic future-proofing government regulations. The outline of my presentation shall be as follows. There will be a talk on the opportunities and challenges in a VUCA environment. What should we be doing to future-proof our regulations in a VUCA world? And what has DAP been doing as a partner in future-proofing regulations. And finally, at the end, we will be showing some conclusions of the presentation. Next slide, please. During the early part of 2018, we noticed at the DAP the sudden surge of requests for our assistance from the different government agencies, ranging from assistance for reorganization in view of some additional roles and functions imposed by law on some agencies like the National Bureau of Investigation because of the new mandate for them to focus on terrorism. The Philippine Coast Guard, due to their ever-expanding role in guarding our territorial waters, including those islands that are in dispute. The National Power Corporation, in order to meet their missionary functions to provide electricity to those that are outside of the grid, and the Securities and Exchange Commission to meet the challenges of new securities brought about by technology. Our assistance also included the creation of new roadmaps, strategic planning, identification of new competencies and skills, and the like. So, what accounts for this sudden surge or request for assistance? To our mind, we feel that the reason behind these changes is the need for these different organizations to cope in an increasingly disruptive environment. And we call this a VUCA environment. In the interest of time and for purposes of brevity, I will not deep dive into each and every element of the VUCA classification. Suffice it to say that it is a function of two factors, namely, on the vertical side, our ability to predict the results of our action, and on the horizontal side, how much do we know about the situation, and that for each element, there is a proper response to it. So we say that if the situation is volatile, it means that the change happens faster and more frequently. Otherwise stated, what is true today may no longer be true tomorrow, and what happens next is relatively unexpected and unknown. In this case, in a volatile scenario, the proper response is usually to adopt contingency measure. If the situation is uncertain, on the other hand, it means that there is this lack of predictability and that the causal relation of events is unknown. In this case, the proper response is to acquire more information and data through research. In case of a complex situation, it means that the situation has many interconnected parts and variables, that it makes it impossible to fully analyze and lead to a clear conclusion. If this is the environment, then the proper response is to reorganize and replan. The last one is the worst situation, which is the ambiguous environment. It happens when information is incomplete, if information are contradictory or inaccurate. It is difficult to draw any rational interpretation. In this case, the proper response is to experiment. The COVID-19 pandemic is an example of an ambiguous environment. It has no clear precedent in the past, and that is the reason why the government is always calibrating its response. Next slide. For obvious reasons, the VUCA environment has caused so much challenge for our regulators. For BIR, for the Bureau of Internal Revenue, for example, the issue that confronts them is the shift of commerce to online platforms. The question for them is how to tax the case of Lazada, Shopee, Amazon, and other commercial platforms. For them, the question is, where is the status of taxation, and how are we going to enforce taxation? For the Securities and Exchange Commission, the issue is to determine whether cryptocurrencies may be considered as securities so that they may be considered within their jurisdiction. For the National Power Corporation, for example, the issue is, what is the future trends in power? Are we still going to rely on the main grid, or will each household or community of households later on generate its own power? What is the effect of urbanization in its missionary mandate to provide electricity in areas currently outside of the grid? For the National Bureau of Investigation, how should it organize itself? And what are the new competencies and skills that they need to have in order to combat the new mandate for them to counter terrorism? So these are just the examples of the challenges that are faced by our enforcement and regulatory bodies. This situation presents to us some unique challenges and opportunities. Although traditional regulations still work for a stable industry and stable technologies, it is becoming increasingly challenging to cope with rapid changes, to cope with ambiguous boundaries and cross-cutting issues, dynamic and uncertain fields, and the emergence of disruptive technologies. This presents challenges to government to change their way of thinking and approaching policy problems, which often brings into question the effectiveness of legacy regulations. However, a VUCA world also offers the opportunity for governments to update policy processes, ways of thinking, and modernize regulation to be ready for the challenges that lie ahead. I believe that any discussion on future-proofing will have to contend with the VUCA characteristics of this environment. Given this circumstance, we ask ourselves the question, how do we future-proof regulations? Or more specifically, how should law and regulations cope with fast-changing technologies and industries? How should they balance the risks that come with new ideas and the risks of crushing them? How should they help ensure that the benefits of new technologies are widely spread? Let me state at the outset that there are those who believe that future-proofing regulation is not a good idea. Let us take the case of Dr. Thibault Chappelle. In reaction, he said, some legal scholars are pushing to develop future-proof regulation. That is, the regulation that can be enacted with enough flexibility while maintaining true to its original objective. For him, this assumes that the objective of the regulation remains valid no matter how the real world changes. And according to him, this is where the problem lies. No regulation is good regardless of its environment. The regulatory objective needs to modulate, it needs to adapt, it needs to evolve. When, and on the contrary, the law does not evolve or may encounter, the result would be that we encounter two alternative outcomes. That the law becomes inapplicable to its new environment, or that the law remains applicable but enforces an unwanted objective, such as always prohibiting or allowing a practice. However, if you look closely at the statement, what he says is that even if you design a regulation to be flexible, its original purpose for existence may no longer be valid due to a changing environment. And as such, therefore, you cannot really future-proof it. Otherwise stated, What is needed is not only the intrinsic flexibility of a law or a policy, but that the flexibility should extend to the applicability of the law itself. So what does future-proofing mean? Future-proofing simply means anticipating the future and developing methods to minimize the effects of shocks and stresses of future events. It also means making sure that an item continues to be relevant and useful in the future and not become obsolete. Applied to regulations, future-proofing means, from the technology perspective, where thinking is more advanced, it is broadly considered to be about keeping options open, looking at the potential scale of effects in the long term, value rather than cost, and emphasize the heterogeneity of choices. Applied in general terms to regulation, this means being sufficiently agile to adapt to rapid and transformative changes. Having said this, I think there are two strategies in trying to future-proof regulations. First, an external strategy that pertains to the factors that must be considered in the development, creation, and application of a regulation. And second, an internal strategy that pertains to the intrinsic design of any regulation. For purposes of this presentation, we have identified 6 external strategies and 1 important principle when it comes to internal strategy. For the external strategy, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, recommends 3 complementary approaches to support the development of strategies to future-proof regulations. 1, by introducing forward-looking processes, such as strategic foresight and anticipatory innovation. A key element of future-proofing regulation is not just knowing, but continuously analyzing what future challenges will be faced by the government and being able to institutionalize the process of taking them into account in policy analysis, engagement, and decision-making. Strategic foresight, for example, helps deal with future uncertainties by taking into account multiple future possibilities to help organizations become future fit in a VUCA world. In our case at the DAP, we have already trained individuals to conduct scenario planning and strategic foresighting in order to assist and capacitate government agencies apply this process of planning. Number 2 is incorporating future-proofing as part of regulatory policymaking. And this means that our regulators must be proactive. They must be future-facing and innovation-enabling. An example of this is for our regulators to adopt a new working model for their approach to regulations, like the AAA model for anticipatory regulation. According to this framework, there are 3 approaches to regulation, and that all regulatory bodies must be adept at using these techniques. First is the advisory approach to regulation. According to this view, regulators must help new products and services comply with existing regulations. Advisory approaches are designed to make it easier for businesses with new products or services to approach regulators and work with them to test and then adapt the product or service under existing regulations. The goal here is to reduce regulatory frictions and to attract new business by conducting no or a very limited amendments through pre-existing regulation. The second is the adaptive approach to regulation. The second approach means that regulators and consequently regulations must support new innovations by adapting existing regulation framework. The regulation must not hinder innovation. And that the key point here is that the regulator is willing to allow some changes or adjustments to existing regulations to support emerging fields or players. And the third, the anticipatory approach to regulation. The primary goal of anticipatory approaches is to better understand what the impacts of an emerging technology is, which may not be developed enough for use, might be on the economy and society, and therefore what the potential regulatory needs will be. If a regulator has sufficient understanding of the industry and that you design the regulations according to this deep understanding, it is a way of attracting new players in the market. The third element on the OECD recommendation on how to future-proof regulation is through the use of innovative tools such as behavioral insights to understand human behavior and to consider this in the design of regulation. Regulatory policy, especially in the field of economic regulation, draws heavily on deductive models, applying economic concepts of rationality and incentives to solving issues in regulation and market failures. For the most part, we believe that compliance to a regulation can be achieved by providing rewards and penalties. However, social sciences shows that people do not always act rationally, and that there are certain forces at work that influences compliance and non-compliance to a law or a policy. For better compliance, policymakers must turn to the field of behavioral sciences for a clear methodology that generates evidence on how people actually behave, and then collecting evidence of which solutions work and which do not, and applying these findings to improving the outcomes of public policy. The question should not be how much or how little of each type of regulation is necessary. Rather, for each type of regulation, that each type of regulation should complement the other types of regulation. The aim is to establish a mix of policies and institutions that facilitate orderly functioning of the market and at the same time promote trust in the system. Complementing these three items that were identified by the OECD, we at the DAP also believe that there is a need to, one, help regulators develop the needed competencies in a VUCA world. While having good regulations is crucial, how regulations are implemented and applied in practice by the regulators is equally important. In a VUCA world, it is important for a regulator to be equipped with the needed skills to fulfill new tasks, such as a more in-depth understanding of new technologies and business models, perhaps more than the theoretical, economic, and legal knowledge which was prioritized in the previous era. In response to this, the Academy is working on a proposal to develop a general competency framework for regulators in the Philippines. We are conducting a series of meetings with the Embassy of New Zealand, Trade and Enterprise in the development of a regulatory competency framework. The New Zealand government successfully implemented their government regulation qualifications project, which aimed at the professionalization of the regulatory practice in the country. And we hope to do the same in the Philippines. One of the more important competency of a regulator, as mentioned a while ago, is the ability to make risk assessments. Number two complementing strategy would be establishing communities of practice. Aside from having a competency framework for regulators, it is also necessary to treat regulation as a practice. And therefore, as a consequence, it is highly appropriate for practitioners of regulatory frameworks to establish communities of practice, which can be a platform to share about their experiences in the implementation of regulatory impact assessment tools and the like. Regulating must be considered as a competency and not just as a function to be performed, and communities of practice will help make this possible. The third complementing strategy would be through the use of principles as a guide instead of rules. The launch of ARTA's Philippine Good Regulatory Principles is a step in this direction. As discussed earlier, any future-proofing strategy should not be focusing on specific rules. Instead, it should focus on standards and principles, as these are more flexible and adaptable to any change or disruption. For the internal strategy, for the intrinsic strategy, the idea is that the design of regulation must evoke trust and confidence. Confidence of all stakeholders that the system of regulation is sufficiently agile to support rapidly changing field. This is the way to future-proof it. And this can be achieved if the intrinsic attributes of an effective regulatory program or system is observed and maintained. So what are these intrinsic attributes? They are the attributes of necessity, transparency, proportionality, effectiveness, and flexibility. The attribute of necessity implies that regulations must be made only when absolutely necessary. Some even point to the idea that regulation must be the exception rather than the rule. It must not create burdensome bureaucracies. On the other hand, if a regulation do exist out of necessity, it must not induce a false sense of security and inappropriate attitude towards risks. The attribute of transparency in the development of regulation is closely aligned with inclusiveness and accountability. A framework is vital to clearly establish how exposure, consultation, and criticism should flow during the development phase of the regulation itself. On the attribute of proportionality, an analytical tool that is frequently used to gauge proportionality is the Regulatory Impact Analysis, or the RIA. This is an evidence-based approach that allows for a systemic consideration of the benefits and costs of a regulatory proposal to the economy and society. RIA attempts to assign financial values to facilitate comparisons. In the attribute of effectiveness, on the other hand, we ask the question, is the regulation properly targeted? Will the regulation give rise to anomalies and inconsistencies? Can it and will it be properly complied with and enforced? And finally, on flexibility, in this attribute, we ask the question, does the regulation consider potential future developments, or does it stifle innovation? As far as we at the Development Academy of the Philippines is concerned, we have taken steps to help assist and capacitate the public sector in order to cope with future disruptions. In the field of regulations and regulatory practice, we have developed the Modernizing Government Regulation Program, otherwise known as the MGR program. It has a research component. It has a capacity building component. It also includes development of standards component and also serves as a platform for the stakeholders component. As a consequence of our MGR program, we were able to develop our own regulatory cost model framework, develop our own regulatory management system standard, and develop the MGR program website. It is an online portal to serve as a repository of existing and proposed government regulations that will make such information openly available to current businesses, potential business owners, and government agencies. And also the development of a web-based regulatory cost model calculator. And finally, the development of a regulatory cost model on compliance cost guidance notes. We have also, as a result of our program, provided assistance to government agencies in coming up with the guidelines on the issuance of permits, licenses and authorizations under the new normal, and to DTI BPS on the conversion of the regulatory management system to a Philippine national standard and orientation for the Standard Development Organization. Finally, in order to assist the public sector future-proof its broad mandate, we have started to incubate inside the Development Academy of the Philippines our own Center for Strategic Futures. The CSF, or the Center for Strategic Futures, aims to generate ideas, tools, scenarios, and strategies for engagement, collaboration, training, and research in order to deliver better and more proactive solutions to evolving issues and emerging needs of the private and public sector. It is composed of 3 laboratories, namely the Data Analytics Laboratory, or the Center for Excellence for Data Analytics and Artificial Intelligence. This aims to support the government to derive potential value from the data that it is generating from governance processes and the delivery of public services. It aims to bolster public service delivery to citizens through the practice of data-driven governance. It also has the Smart Community Laboratory. This aims to catalyze and accelerate the development of smart and sustainable cities and communities in the country. The SCL prepares an inventory of materials and literature on smart city development and planning, and creates a portfolio of training programs for the benefit of local government units to build capacities in the planning and implementation of smart city projects and initiatives. And finally, it has the Futures Thinking and Innovation Laboratory. This will serve as a platform for collaboration and knowledge co-creation that anticipates emerging complex issues, identifies relevant, smart, and innovative solutions, and provides integrated interventions toward enabling the country to adapt to a VUCA world and building resilient and sustainable communities. In conclusion, let me just reiterate some key points. First, it is important to acknowledge that the playing field has changed, and we cannot approach the way we do regulations in the way that we did it in the past. The presence of a VUCA environment necessitates the government to change its approach in order to be more agile, to be more adaptable, and take advantage of the rapid and transformative changes that are happening. Second, the way to do this future-proofing of our regulations, it is important to practice and institutionalize forward-looking processes, such as strategic foresight and innovation, in order for us to get a substantial understanding of the future challenges and opportunities, and be able to proactively take steps in helping design the future. Future-proofing regulations is all about using the law not to kill, but to give life to the potentialities or possibilities of the future. In addition to that, it is also necessary to develop the necessary competencies for regulators, apply behavioral insights, incorporate strong feedback mechanisms, have an open dialogue and public engagement in order to design our laws and policies to have more flexibility and adaptability to emerging challenges and opportunities. And lastly, let us learn from Charles Darwin, who said, "It is not the strongest or the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change." Thank you and good morning.
Thank you so much, President Jojo Caronan of the Development Academy of the Philippines. You know, one of the notes or one of the noteworthy points of his discussion is this: knowing regulation must be an exception rather than rule. And for those who wish to refresh their minds kung ano ba tong VUCA na binabanggit ni President Jojo Caronan, VUC or buka. So, we are down to our last topic. But definitely, this is not, this may be the last, but definitely not the least, no? Our speaker's educational background includes an MS Public Policy and Management from the University of London and a diploma in Strategy and Innovation from Oxford. So I think he is one of the most fitting and competent to be talking and sharing his insights in this webinar. So he's also a former cabinet secretary and civil service chairman and a journalist. Let us listen to Mr. Ricardo L. Saludo, the founding president and CEO of the Center of Strategy, Enterprise and Intelligence, or CenSEI, on the topic Making Reforms Work and Making It Stick. Secretary, you have the floor now. Secretary, can you hear us?
Thank you.
All right, sir.
Maraming salamat. Maraming salamat sa pag-anyaya sa amin dito sa webinar natin. At naku, napakaganda ng mga presentation mula pa nung simula yung keynote address ng ating Director General at tuloy sa presentation tungkol sa information technology, yung programa ng ARTA na napakayaman, napakaraming tinutukoy at ang ang presentation ni President Corona ng DAP na talagang tumukoy sa mga malalaking pagbabagong nangyayari sa mundo. Ang pananaw ko ay galing sa unang-una sa karanasan at sa trabaho namin dito sa CenSEI at yan ang una kong tutukuyin. Siguro i-flash na natin ang presentation. Ang tutukuyin natin ngayon, making reform work and making it stick. Ang mangyari po, ang marami sa mga reforma na nakikita natin sa gobyerno, maganda sa simula tapos nawawala ng sigla pagsulong. Kaya yun po ang aming bibigyan ng talagang pansin dito. What CenSEI can do
Secretary, are you still there? I think we somehow lost the connection of Secretary Ricardo.
do this work. Next slide, please.
Correct.
So isinilang po ito po ang ating presentation. Una po, background tungkol sa amin. Pangalawa, ang ating mga reforma, kung paano ito maisusulong, kung ano po ang kailangan upang itong mga reforma ay kumapit, ika nga, no? At saka kung paano ang mga programa namin sa CenSEI matutulungan kayo rito. Next slide, please. So a little bit about CenSEI. It is a Center for Strategy, Enterprise, and Intelligence. Tunutukoy po natin. At ito ay tumutukoy hindi lamang sa gobyerno, kundi sa pribadong sektor. Tatlong bagay ang tinutukoy, ang pagplano ng mga leadership strategy, kung paano mapapahusay ang mga organisasyon, ito yung enterprise part, at intelligence ang paglikom ng tamang impormasyon at paggamit nito para talaga mapahusay ang ating mga negosyo at gobyerno. Next slide, please. A little bit background about myself. My educational background was already talked about. My co-founder unfortunately passed away. He is an MBA from Harvard, Gary Olivar, but also very much involved in the country. Some of the older ones may recall his name from the 1970s protest movement, but he was arrested and then eventually went to the States to get his MBA. So magkasama po kami ni Gary to set this up. My own background was I was Asia Week magazine editor before joining the government in 2001. And there I was the cabinet secretary, the chairman of the Civil Service Commission. And relevant to what we're talking about, because of my work as cabinet secretary, I would review programs and directives to the cabinet. So I would see in real time what problems they were encountering in implementing programs and projects. Kaya yung ating pong karanasan dito ay talagang galing doon sa mga nagiging problema sa gobyerno. And then when I was Civil Service Commission Chairman, my #1 project was implementing the first Anti-Red Tape Act back in 2007. So we we actually implemented it. We put in after 1 year in more than 4,000 agencies all over the country, 3 things: the Citizens Charter, the Public Assistance Desk, and an anti-fixer campaign. And what happened? After that year that we implemented this, there was an annual survey that was being done by social weather stations on actual corruption on the ground as assessed by the private sector. After that 1 year, the indicators for bribery dropped by 6 percentage points. And what was interesting is that was a year before elections, when normally the bribery goes up. Pero after the implementation of the ARTA, bribery went down substantially, 6 percentage points, even before an election year. Kaya ito pong ginagawa natin dito na paglaban sa red tape at pagpapahusay ng mga programa, it reduces corruption. At yan po ang ating isa sa mga pinagsisikapan dito. Next slide, please. In our current company now, I'm fortunate to have with me Tony Calao, one of the predecessors of President Caronan, and he retired several years ago after spending a lifetime in DAP, and he brings his own experience and expertise to our work at CenSEI. Kaya pagdating po sa mga bagay tungkol sa gobyerno, marami po tayong mapagtukunan ng karanasan at kaalaman. Next slide, please. Now, we also interface with outside entities. On the ICT side, we tie up with Microsoft. On risk management, nabanggit yung risk management sa mga presentation kanina, we are tied up with the Enterprise Risk Management Academy of Singapore. And several of our people, including myself, have taken courses there. We've also tied up with a compliance and data privacy, data security entity in Singapore, Better Business Governance, as well as the Gray Matter Forensic Advisory in Malaysia, whose head is the head of Transparency International in Malaysia. So he's country head of Transparency International. So yan po ang aming mga strategic partners. Next slide. So ito po ang aming mga bagay na tinutukoy. This is some of the things that we do. I won't go through this very extensively, but this is the strategy side, and it's particularly focused a lot on strategic advisory with our clients. Next slide. On the enterprise side, we particularly focus here on organizational development to really empower organizations to do what they aim to do. And in particular, for our anti-red tape programs, the quality management system, which is an ISO certification, the enterprise risk management training, which is an ISO certification as well, the international standards of organization. And we also have an anti-bribery systems training on offer, as well as overall enterprise risk and organizational development. Next slide, please. And on the intelligence side, next slide, we particularly focus on, of course, data gathering, as well as building our capabilities in strategic communication. So sustainable reforms must first require leadership, organization, risk management, and strategic communication. Next slide. So nabanggit na kanina yung mga kailangan ng risk management, kailangan yung organisasyon handa, kailangan yung mga programa at saka mga regulatory reforms are well planned. That's been discussed earlier. Our particular focus, as I mentioned, will be on the actual organizational development and the support for this in terms of risk management, strategic communication, and strategic thinking and operations. Next slide. So ngayon, paano ba nagsusulong ng pagbabago? Now, when we say future-proofing, it doesn't only mean making sure the regulations work in the future. It also means making sure what you want to do in the future, how you want to implement the regulations will actually happen. That's also part of future-proofing. And here are some of the key elements that it must have. There must be a drive within people and within the organization to change. There must be clear leadership support, dapat from the top. No? There should be proper communication, broad support, especially from the stakeholders of the organization. Hindi lang yung mga nasa loob, pati yung mga nasa labas. If it's a company, it would include the shareholders. Dissenters must be kept at bay. Unfortunately, we've seen, in a lot of our own experience, we've seen pockets of dissent within organizations blocking reform. That has to be addressed. People must be empowered to speak up and to really contribute to the change. And there must quick wins. Every victory should be celebrated so that people feel change is really happening. Next slide. So here are key strategies that we can move forward on. There would be orientation. This is how we approach a training. Orientation. Gap analysis. These are to look at what problems there are in the existing organization. So the training programs that we give are tailored to the organization. Ano ba ang talagang kailangan nila? Then the actual training itself. And after the training, coaching on actually implementing what they have been trained for. So this is the overall training approach. And by the way, this training approach is also what the ISO certifications require, where the only thing missing here for ISO is the last part, which is the actual accreditation, which is usually done by another organization. Next slide. So ito po ang aming mga packages, some of the packages that we feel will advance reform effectiveness and sustainability as envisioned by the ARTA program. Next slide. So these are the things that we hope to be able to do to capacitate the agency through these very specific training programs to address risk. Very important to address risk. Many things fail because there is no monitoring of risk, so that the risk reaches crisis point and the program fails. So hindi na natin paabutin do sa crisis. Sa simula pa lang, binabantayan na yung pwedeng maging problema at inaaksyonan kaagad. No? Then there is also need for organizational change so that people really have ownership of the reforms. Hindi lang ito binababa sa kanila. And also communication with the stakeholders and the media so that they too will support the change. They too will fight for the change. And if anybody tries to block the change, and sometimes the opposition can come from outside the organization, these stakeholders will join the agency in resisting these obstacles to change. Next slide. So ito po ang ilan sa mga programa natin. Of course, there's training work, there's the ISO certification, organizational development, communications, and we are also asked sometimes to do surveys to check whether the reforms are working. This is part of actually evaluating whether the reforms are sticking and working. Next slide. So yan po ang ilan sa mga reform initiatives natin. As I mentioned, different programs. I will not go through all of this, but the general framework is actual certified programs, organizational development, strategic communications, especially to stakeholders and internally, and if necessary, surveys to assess our reform initiatives. Next slide. Now, this is the ISO quality management system. I believe DAP also does this kind of program. On our part, we will adjust existing QMS systems, and many agencies already have this, adjusting it to better align with the ARTA changes. Next slide. Now, part of what we are also able to offer would be ICT services. A big a way to make sure that the program works and sticks is to incorporate it into some kind of computerized system. Recently I was very fortunate to get my passport renewed, and it was all done pretty much a lot online. Applying for the appointment, going there, submitting the requirements. I had some missing papers. I was able to submit it by email, and the whole thing came out on time. No, so really ICT services, and I'm glad there's that central business portal that will greatly enhance this for different for businesses. So this is something also we can help with CenSEI. Next slide. So these are advantages of ICT. You're familiar with them as well. So I'll move to the next slide. Now, we also have an anti-bribery management system program for those agencies that want this. Now, we don't expect that this needs to be implemented all over an agency, but if you feel certain sectors or certain segments within the agency tend to be bribery prone, we can help implement this as well. So this is a certified standard, ISO 37001. You can go through certification. There are certifying entities in the country. We can prepare you for them. And right now in the country, there is only one entity in the Philippines that has gone through this and has been certified. It's a private company, Atlantic Gulf and Pacific Company, AG&P. We'd love to see government agencies also undertake this standard. Next slide. So now the way we're going to approach the anti-bribery system, it doesn't have to be built from the ground up. In fact, it builds on the quality management system that's already in place in the agency. It's just a matter of incorporating the standards for anti-bribery into the existing QMS. So you actually create a quality and anti-bribery management system. Magkasama na. That's the beauty of the programs that we are offering. They are integrated. They support each other. No, next slide. Now, we also look at culture. Kanina nabanggit, how do you sustain this? And one thing that I feel could have also might have needed a lot more discussion is how culture, how the way people behave in an organization impacts the success of the organization, and also in particular the regulatory work that it does. Yung maraming mga nasulat na mga paper sinasabi there's a culture of corruption in some governments. No, that's part of the culture problem. Sometimes you can have all the rules, but if there is a culture problem, then the internal culture, the organizational culture actually finds ways to get around the rules. So kahit nandun na yung mga rules, hindi umuubra. No? So we particularly give focus on culture, organizational culture and change. No? And eventually we hope organizations can reach a point that you can say it has a good soul. Magtataka siguro tao, ano ba yung soul? How can an organization have a soul? Well, in fact, there is a book called The Organizational Soul. And the whole idea is you create a culture where a certain principles and values and even narratives and heroes are celebrated, espoused, and these form a culture. And I say this also bearing in mind the religious context of that. The most successful organization in the world is one that focuses on the soul. The most successful organization in the world, lasting 2,000 years with a billion people part of it, is the Catholic Church. It has the most schools, the most hospitals and it is focused on soul. So I say this not as a religious person, but as an organizational person, we build the organizational soul, so that the soul, even if there are changes in the leadership, or there may be all sorts of pressures, or the kind of VUCA situation that President Corona mentioned, the organizational soul and the culture is able to sustain performance. Next slide. So ito po yung framework natin for it's a bit small, no, but we provide all these elements of to prepare the organization. And I'd like to give special attention here to risk and crisis management. I've talked about soul. We also give a lot of importance to risk management. And here I will give a very just a quick example. No, one of the SONA prescription or promises given by directives given by President Roy in her very first SONA. And I think with her very first SONA, she gave about 55 directives, and they were all time bound. So that's the thing, they were specific and time bound. So people can really hit her if she failed. And what we had to do then was to really check over time how much was being done. So one of her directives was 1 million hectares of private land and 1 million hectares of private land distributed in land reform. I mean, it sounds like over 6 years you can do it, or 10 years you can do it. Well, we had to actually check it every year, and not just every year, every 6 months. And we could see sometimes that there would be backsliding. For whatever reason, we would have to alert the agency, so that at the very end of her term, we actually exceeded 1 million. I mean, that's the way you get things done. You have to monitor it closely and check for any risks. Next slide. Strategic communication. Okay. These are a particular strength of CenSEI, and in fact here we consult with major entities in government and outside government. It's also something that my own background in media helps with. And when I was the cabinet secretary, and even quietly while I was Civil Service Commission chairman, I was providing daily advisories to the government on how to address media issues. And here are the key points that we apply. Just very briefly, you have to know what are the major issues and stakeholders that are strategically important to your organization or to your program. Then number 2, you have to build relationships with those key stakeholders. That's the first thing you do, even before you look at the news. You have to build relationships with your key stakeholders, because you need them to deal with communications. Then you have to do daily monitoring and messaging on key issues. That's actually something that we particularly do very closely. And there should be major political and organizational initiatives and events to advance your chosen messaging. And finally, you have to have crisis communications management to watch out, to prevent crisis, but also to respond when crises happen. Next slide. Okay, this is a particular protocol that we follow if there are crises in media. You have to mobilize, as I mentioned, a base of support. That's alliances. You have to create a new story to fight the story that's being thrown at you. You have to stabilize a raucous environment, because that will lead people to address the issue very deliberately, very factually. If it's very emotional, it's very hard to get your point across. Then you can try to put across the facts, get the facts straight. Finally, you execute your program, and then you maintain your drive. You maintain your strategic direction, even if there are catcalls from outside. This is the protocol we follow in our strategic communications. Next slide. Okay, and this is again a program for risk management and crisis management. I won't go through them. You probably have similar versions with you, but the idea is pick your priorities that you want to protect, undertake risk reduction and management, watch what's happening outside so you can respond, be ready with your provisions, your logistics, your people, your protocols, just in case things bad happen. Then immediately you move fast, you recalibrate as the crisis develops, and after the crisis, post-mortem, evaluate, enhance your system, and fix mistakes. Next slide. Okay, this is how to contact us, and we look forward to hearing from you from in our various avenues here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Ricardo Saludo from the Center for Strategy, Enterprise, and Intelligence. Wow, ang daming na-cover ng CenSEI, including yung crisis communications. It's very relevant to me as the head of the Public Relations Unit of the Anti-Red Tape Authority. And for sure, for many organizations taking part today in our webinar, to recognize them, our audience is composed of the committees on anti-red tape o CARTs of the various government agencies. So makikita po natin sila dyan sa participants tab ng ating Zoom. And some of them are actually asking if they can get a copy of the presentations of our speakers. Yes, we will be posting later on as we progress with our discussion the bit.ly link. Ipopost din po ng ating Assistant Communications Head, si Ms. Althea Abisamis, yung mismong link sa comment box. So you can access and download all the presentations of our speakers from DICT up to Center for Strategy, Enterprise, and Intelligence, or CenSEI. And also, for all those who finished and kept with us all throughout the webinar, meron po tayong certificates, electronic certificates. Later on, one by one of our teammates will be sending the survey form that you have to fill out in order for us to get necessary information, specifically kasama doon yung email addresses nyo, where we will be forwarding to you your electronic certificates for attending this webinar, Future Proofing of Regulatory Reforms, an ARTA webinar with DAP, DICT, and CenSEI. We are not through yet. Before we move forward to our open forum, let me call Ms. Elaine Diaz from the Public Relations Unit to facilitate the photo opportunity. Ms. Elaine?
Thank you, Ms. Ria. Hello, everyone. May we request everyone to kindly turn on your cameras for the photo opportunity. This is for documentation purposes. May we request Sir Vince to kindly stop sharing for the photo op. All right, we currently have 5 frames. Let me begin with the first one on 3. 1, 2, 3. Second frame, again on 3. 1, 2, 3. Third. 1, 2, 3. Second to the last frame. 1, 2, 3. And last but not the least, 1, 2, 3. That's it. Thank you so much. Back to you, Ms. Ria.
Thank you, Elaine Diaz, for facilitating the photo opportunity. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not through yet. We still have the open forum to synthesize all the things that our presenters mentioned during their discussion. So, RTVM, Sir Hero, pwede na ba nating i-activate yung panels natin so that ma-feel natin talaga na even if it's virtual, we're still having this kind of setup na open forum as if physical, no? So, joining us in the open forum, of course, Secretary Jeremiah Belgica, Other Secretary Ernesto Perez, Ms. Cristina Cristobal on behalf of USEC Ali, of course, Secretary Ricardo Saludo, and President Jojo Caronan of the Development Academy of the Philippines. So, nandito na ba ang ating mga principals? Okay. RTVM, ready na tayo? Okay, mag-shoutout muna tayo kasi we are like more than 100 here in the Zoom room, but actually marami rin pong nakatutok sa atin sa ating Facebook and YouTube streaming all across the platforms of Anti-Red Tape Authority and the PCOO pages. So, i-acknowledge lang po natin sila because kanina pa sila nakatutok. So, we have Ms. Yolete Engpo from the Provincial Government Cavite Office of the Public Safety. Naka-work from home daw siya. Hello ma'am, maraming salamat sa pagtutok. Mr. Ronald De Leon Diaz from Teresa Rizal. Ms. Jaina Hali from DOH. Wow, we have a representative from DOH. Ms. Cecil Tajon from PGCOPS PPOD. I hope I pronounced your agency correctly. We also have avid viewers like Mr. Nestor Zabala. Who else? Ms. Joveline Santiago here at Naiko. Magandang umaga. Mr. Nestor Zabala from the Duty Free Philippines. And another from PGCOPS Cavite, Mr. Alexander Mojica, PGCOPS PPOD Felix Ocolencia, BSPHO, Ms. Silvina Rojas, and many, many more. Ang dami pong nakatutok sa atin from various government agencies sa ating Facebook streaming at Anti-Red Tape Authority. So, banggitin na rin po natin, we also have the presence of our ARTA champions. Ito po yung mula sa iba't ibang private sector, sa business and media sectors na parte at katuwang ng Anti-Red Tape Authority sa pagtutulak ng ating agenda against red tape. PCCI, from the PCCI, Secretary General Pascual, from OHAP, the President himself, Mr. Ramil Gutierrez, from CFW, the President himself, Mr. Gabriel Aranza Mendez, and the rest are tuned in our Facebook and YouTube streaming. Maraming salamat po. Okay, meron lang pong reminder kay President Jojo Caronan. Sir, kindly please open your video so you can be included in our screen. Okay, sige, let's start our open forum. First question ko po siguro kay Ms. Cristina Cristobal, no? Who earlier presented the Central Business Portal on behalf of the DICT, USEC Ali Atienza. Okay, ma'am, to date po, how many local governments have already embarked and joined our CBP? Ms. Christy? Hello, Ms. Christy? Okay, I think baka she's trying to reconnect, probably because of a technical glitch. But yes, from ARTA, baka po meron tayo, USEC. Sec, maybe we have fresh updates regarding the LGUs who are able to embark and join our CBP to date po. Or any latest updates. Sec?
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure if Miss Christie is here, but right now, there are several LGUs that are already connected with the Central Business Portal, and I think merong around mga 16 na mga LGUs na it's either pasok na sila dyan or yung kanilang hyperlink is already available with the Central Business Portal. The general goal is all LGUs who are already using the electronic business permitting licensing system being provided by the DICT for free sa mga LGUs, and right now we are nearly 600 ang siyang currently tinatapos po nila yung pagko-complete and eventual launch ng kanilang electronic business one-stop shop through the use of the electronic business permitting licensing system software. The goal is all of these LGUs, all 600 of them, or kung may susunod pa nagagamit din, would be able to connect themselves already to the Central Business Portal. So right now, I believe there are about 16 na LGUs na nakakabit sa Central Business Portal. But as to the number of LGUs who already have automated their business permitting licensing system, mas madami po dyan. No? Sinabi ko nga ho, merong sa count ho namin ay 600 na yung gumagamit ng electronic business permitting licensing system. Although hindi ho lahat sila ay nakakabit na sa CBP. No? So hopefully by the end ho ng administration po ng ating po Pangulo ay we would be able to attach all of this to the Central Business Portal.
Ms. Christie, I now see you in the list of participants. Secretary Belgica, thank you for your response. Ms. Christie, are you here?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Earlier, I was asking po, actually, Secretary Belgica already provided answer. Baka may maidagdag lang po kayo. I was asking to date how many LGUs have connected or embarked or joined in our CBP, and baka may mga latest updates pa tayo with regards to CBP. Especially that this was specifically mentioned by the President during his final and sixth SONA last July.
Okay. In addition to what DG Belgica mentioned, on top of the 16 IBPLS users, which we have fully integrated with CBP, Quezon City, as an independent BPLS, has also been integrated. So also, we have provided hyperlinks to those who have sent LOIs, yung letters of intent, to the DICT for their independent BPLS system for full integration with the CBP. What we did is to determine the readiness of their processes as well as their applications in integrating with us. But out of the 10 LOIs, we have already 3 ongoing integration. Those are Caloocan, Pasay, and Valenzuela, and Parañaque. But Valenzuela, we're just waiting for the MOA to be signed. But all the technical activities, including the user testing, has been fully signed off. So with that, since the IBPLS of DICT is already in full gear due to the initiative by the ARTA, so there were about 257 LGUs that were added to the hyperlink. When we say hyperlink, we have the auto redirection of the applicants to their websites. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. We have a question from OHAP. Ma'am, sir, from OHAP, can you please turn on and can you please unmute and ask your question directly? I think it's related to CBP because the question that he dropped in our comment box is, hi from OHAP, how can we file? So, sir, from OHAP, please unmute and ask the question directly to Ms. Christie po. You have the floor now.
Okay, good morning. I'm Alex Montañez. I'm the chairman of OHAP National. our question is this. How can we file a complaint with confidentiality? Because we are dealing with city engineers, we are dealing with office of the building officials. We are filing our application for billboard permits. Mind you, right now I myself is a victim because we have around 4 billboard application and it's already 3 years old. Kung lalabanan namin sila face to face, wala ring mangyari sa business namin. I'm not only the one who is a victim, but most of us all over the Philippines. So ano po ang proseso that we can file? We will file a complaint with confidentiality. Yun lang po.
All right. Thank you, sir. Well, it's not related to CBP, no? Secretary Belgica,
Yeah, I will
do you wish
answer
to
that.
respond? Yes.
Yeah, I will answer that. Una ho sa lahat, you know, ARTA, for everybody's appreciation rin sa mga nakikinig. Sa mga gusto magreklamo, there are several ways of filing a way of filing a case sa amin. You could do it through an anonymous complaint if you want. Maari din pong magpakilala ho kayo. An anonymous complaint is actually acted upon. In fact, a lot of the things that we have acted upon that resulted to entrapments and everything, and even to a thorough investigation resulted from an anonymous report. There, you could also report identifying yourself, like yourself, that you kayo po, no, sinusumbong ninyo, at hindi naman ho natin maaari itong hindi naman ho natin sasabihin, no, dun sa inyong inireklamo. Subalit, it would be a motu proprio investigation that your information would be taken as a tip by ARTA. Now, I think yung sinasabi po natin na reklamo sa nangyayari po mga pangiipit, eventually, what would happen is if you're pertaining to a particular application po ninyo, ano po, na naipit na 3 taon. Una po sa lahat, ihingin ko sana na ibigay niyo po yung application ninyo ngayon. Kasi kung kumpleto na po yan, if your application is already complete and fully paid for according to the Citizens Charter, now that application is automatically approved by operation of law. Yan ho ang sabi ng batas na aprobado na po yung inyong aplikasyon. At yung nang-ipit ho ng papel ninyo, ay pasasagutin ho natin kung bakit hindi ho sila kinakailangan ma-file ng kasong administratibo, at kung meron hong paulit-ulit na nangyari ho dito, maaari pa hong matanggal at makulong ang taong gumagawa po niya. Now, have there been instances that ARTA already filed cases? Yes. Right now, we have 580 cases in the past 2 years that we have already filed. And almost 10,000 applications that ARTA declared automatically approved by operation of law in the past 2 years lamang. So, although we will be more than happy, sir, to act on the anonymous complaints, pero we are also calling on to our ARTA champions, wag ho tayong ma-intimidate sa mga taong nangiipit ho sa atin. Kasi kung wala hong magsusumbong, wala hong magbabago, and isumbong po natin sila, i-complain po natin sila, kaya ho merong 2-strike policy na sinasabi po ang ating batas, is upang sa ganon kapag umulit ho sila, kasi yan po ang karamihan ng kinatatakutan ng mga pribadong sektor, the fear of reprisals, no, baka kabalikan. Pag inulit ho nila yon, makukulong na po sila. So, we do encourage that you file your complaint kung sinasabi ho natin na marami pong ganitong situation, marami pong ganitong cases, at meron lamang isang particular na office na patuloy na itong ginagawa, then I would invite siguro yung grupo po ninyo, no, kung sino po yung pinahihirapan. We would be requesting also for affidavits para sabay-sabay ho natin ito ma-file. There was a recent situation wherein ARTA was able to get 30 affidavits from 30 different companies against a particular office. So we did file 420 separate cases against the same office. So ganun po ang pwede po natin gawin. So I do request po sana na ibigay niyo po sa amin ng detalye na to, and ako po mismo ang gagarantiya na aaksyonan po natin ito agad. Hindi na po ito aabot ng katapusan ng linggong ito. We will have a more definite action if we see that your applications are already in order and fully paid for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving forward to that, hindi lang ho sana apprehension, kung hindi moving forward na mabago yung sistema. Kasi this problem will go on and on, kasi I believe, ARTA for that matter, hindi lang apprehension or apprehension kung sino man ang may sala. Kung hindi, mapa-improve. Let them improve their services to the taxpayers para hindi na po maulit yung mga ganitong kasing mga corruption sa loob ng government, because anything application that is delayed is considered a corruption. Yun po ang sabi ng ating presidente. Thank you very much, ARTA Secretary
Salamat
DJ.
po. Sagutin ko lang po, dalawa po kasi ang function ng ARTA. ARTA's function is empowerment and enforcement. So as what you have mentioned to me, sir, kanina, you intimated that a complaint was pending for 3 years. I don't think any, sabihin ho natin government inefficiency or government efficiency ay makakasagot. Parang pag ganun ho katagal talaga niyan, sir, sa tingin ho natin, talagang parang may umiipit at nang umuupo po dyan. So yan ho ang sinasabi natin, we simply need to crack the whip against those who would intentionally mangipit at hindi ho gumalaw, kasi there's really no explanation for that. Now, as to the process improvement, yes, sir, we would be continuing to look on these processes na sinasabi po natin. As you all know, sir, the streamlining of procedure is now the other part of our function, which is the empowerment function, streamlining, re-engineering, and even leading to automation. So thank you very much, sir, for that information. We are looking forward to working with you soon.
Thank you so much, sir. Your point is well taken. It's actually your point regarding the seeming culture of corruption in government agencies is one of the highlights of the presentation of Secretary Ricardo Saludo of CenSEI earlier, that there should be a change talaga in the organizational culture in order to transform agencies, and of course, kasama na rito yung future-proofing of regulations. So going back to CBP, Ms. Christie, from my understanding, CBP is meant for registering businesses, no? But do we also have a project, for example, for first-time applicants, employees, ordinary Filipinos, who just want to have their SSS number, PhilHealth, Pag-ibig, because probably many of us have experienced in the past na we have to go to the offices of SSS, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth in order to process these IDs or these information. So are we crafting, or do we have a system in place to cater to that kind of services, ma'am?
As of now, I don't have any update on that, since my area is on the business. So we'll give an update as soon as we get any from our group. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, ma'am. Now I go to Mr. Ricardo Saludo of CenSEI. No? Sir, kanina na-mention nyo na probably CenSEI can help with the CBP, no? And I just want to connect my question, no? So paano kaya ang magiging system? How can the government give that kind of service to that kind of audience, like yung mga first-time applicants, especially that it is pandemic now and it's very uncertain?
Thank you for that question. This is really where on the first thing that comes in is communication. Yung mga programa natin na mahusay naman na pagkaplano, at meron naman mga paraan para yung tao ay makakonekta, this has to be, of course, communicated to the stakeholders, no? And our particular experience that the best way now to communicate is social media. Maraming mga social media groups for these various sectors that access government, whether it's business or OFWs. If you put a message in one of these social media about the programs you have for a particular sector, kalat agad yan, and then they go to you. No, so I think communication is one. Secondly, you're already in touch with key stakeholders, PCCI, the business sector. You just had somebody asking on behalf of the outside advertising group, no? So marami po tayong mga sectoral representatives. They too can communicate issues, and they can also help raise issues, of course, gaya ng ginawa nga kanina right in front of us during this forum, no? So second part would be, of course, interface with the key stakeholders, with the sectors you want to help, no? And the good thing about that is when you interface with the sectors, if you are under attack, those sectors come to your aid. Tutulungan kanila, no? Kasi they see that you're sincere in helping and serving them. No? Thank you. Thank you.
Because if this materialize, it will add on our goal na talagang to ease the doing of business in the country, especially during this time that we still have meron na ang balita kahapon no Lambda variant, so the situation is really uncertain. From our ARTA officials, do you wish to add in the discussion? Yusek Nes, Sec?
I'll ask Yusek Nes to respond.
Yes, sir. Yusek Nes, ano pa po bang mga natin?
Parang wala na ako madagdag dun sa sinabi ni Secretary Saludo. I appreciate for his candidness. And I do agree that indeed, whenever agencies are called upon, and especially when concerns are brought to the attention of the social media, you'd expect parang more immediate action or response. In the same way that we at the Anti-Red Tape Authority also make use of the available social media facilities and even all our activities actually, because we find this very effective. In fact, the staff, the officers, the staff of the Anti-Red Tape Authority are mainly young people, and being millennials, they're really well into the technology, and indeed the pandemic has expedited the use of the digital platform in the way services have to be done. In fact, whenever we receive excuses from government agency citing that in view of the pandemic they were not able to deliver the services, we always counter that the pandemic should actually move us into expediting all the initiatives, because this is what the people expect from us. Maraming salamat.
Yusek, matanong na rin kita. The question is also directed to you. It's from Miss Ana Lea Gonzalez of Manila Times. She said, I'm not sure if this was already mentioned in the presentation earlier, but when do we expect to launch the PBRI? So when is our date for the launching, sir?
Yeah, every Wednesday we have our excuse me checkpoint meeting, and we plan to target the soft launching of the PBRIs together with the Artemis by on or before September 30. Actually, our target date is September 30 because this PBRIs is actually being done together with another initiative of ARTA, which is the Artemis or anti-red tape electronic management system. The PIBRIS involve uploading of regulations, both existing and proposed regulations by agencies. So this will entail training of the various agencies to be able to enable them to upload their regulations to the program and platform. And then, of course, this is the first phase, initial phase. We have identified 17 priority agencies. But for the Artemis, which is the requirement of agencies to submit their updated citizens charter, this has to be done. This must have been done already because this is already effective. But we have developed this program whereby agencies will be able to upload their updated citizens charter. The citizens charter is a document required of all agencies to let the people know, let the public know about the services that they render, the requirements being imposed, the fees to be paid, the process, and of course, more importantly, the standard processing time. Wherein, as mentioned by DJ earlier, if the agency fails to act on the transaction within the standard processing time of 3/7/20, then there is a provision of the law on automatic approval. The reason why I'm collaborating the discussion not only on PEBRIS but also Artemis, because these two programs really work hand in hand. No? And I do hope that with the SOAP launching by September and after training the agencies concerned, we will be able to operationalize it by end of the year, at least partial implementation. And then next year, before the end of the president, before the end of the current administration ends, we should have been able to fully operationalize both PIBRIS and the Artemis. These are really good system and programs developed through the support of the USAID and UP Public Administration governance that will really make it easier for the public to have access to all the regulations that agencies are issuing and implementing, making sure that these regulations have been subjected to proper consultations, and even the platform provides for a commenting system. So, and also that the regulations will be classified according to industry. So supposing one intends to engage in the business of food, so all the related regulations of food, they can easily find it by simply making use of the system. Thank you.
Can I?
Yes, sir.
Can I add that point? You know,
Sure.
this automatic approval of applications, this really has to be publicized. Many people, of course, assume pag walang action, hindi gumagalaw. Just publicize that alone will clear so much. And of course, it will also pressure the agency to act. No, kasi pag hindi siya gumalaw, approve, no? So just that alone, publicize that. If people are aware of that, then sila mismo, wala pang action, it's approved. Now, one other thing that ICT can help, no? If applications are uploaded into a time-sensitive website, so nag-apply, naka-upload doon. At a certain point, that website will simply, based on time frame, tag the application as having been approved. So there is actually a public online way to check. You know, yung nag-apply ako, nandun yung application ko. After so many days, it will be deemed approved kasi hindi gumalaw, hindi inaksyonan, no? If that's available online, again, people will check on it, no? Will check, and by the way, ARTA can also check on it. Bakit? Kasi naka-upload doon, it's publicly seen kung sino nag-apply, no? And then ARTA can see kung alin ang hindi gumagalaw, no? Thank you.
DG?
Yes, maganda yung sinabi po
Maganda
ni
yung sinabi.
Sec, no?
That's really good.
Yeah. Secmai? Yes, sir. Baka for the benefit of those who are watching us online, lalo na yung mga ordinary citizens, let us inform them about this automatic approval provision in our law, the Republic Act 11032.
Okay, since we are live via the I think the RTVM also is carrying us today. Okay, sa lahat ng mga nakikinig ngayon, sa mga kasamahan natin sa mga ARTA champions dito, ang isa ho sa magandang bagay dito ho sa bagong ARTA law, no, sa RA 11032, ay nagbigay ho ng prescribed processing time. Ang batas sa bawat transaction sa gobyerno, all government transactions should be classified into three. Should fall dito sa tatlong classification: simple, complex, or highly technical lamang. No? Kung sila ay simple transaction, meaning ministerial, 3 days lang po dapat. Kung ito po ay may analysis na kasama at hindi ho ministerial, 7 days po. No? Kung ito po ay involving public health, public safety, 20 working days ang ibinibigay ho ng batas. Now, if hindi ho ito aksyonan ng government agency, no? At ayon po sa kanilang Citizens Charter, na nakasulat po doon sa Citizens Charter, ano po ang requisitos, ano ang requirements, magkano ang kailangan bayaran, ano ang proseso, at nagawa niyo na po yan. Kung hindi ho yan umaksyon within 3/7/20, your applications are automatically approved by operation of law, meaning hindi ho sinasabi doon na aprubahan dapat ng government agencies, pero ang sinasabi ho doon, Kongreso na po ang nag-aproba ng inyo pong aplikasyon. So yan ho ang mahalaga. Now, what else did the law say? Yung hawak-hawak po ninyong resibo, no? Or katunayan na bayaran at naisumiti mo na lahat ng requirements, ang siyang tatayong katibayan ng inyo pong aplikasyon ay automatically approved na by operation of law. So ibig sabihin, pwede nyo na pong gamitin yan bilang katibayan. Pero, truth be told, mahirap kasi umikot na hawak-hawak lang yung resibo mo na wala yung permit galing sa opisina, hindi ho kayo maniwala. Kaya hindi ho maniwala yung iba ninyong kausap, yung iba ninyong katransaksyon. Subalit, marami hong gumagawa, pupunta po sa ARTA para ho magsabi na, sir, hindi ho inaksyonan. So what would ARTA do na? And what ARTA has been doing is pagkakuha po namin ay padadalahan po namin ng notice online within 24 hours na magpaliwanag po, no? Kung bakit hindi ho inaksyonan, and within 3 days ay maglalabas ho tayo ng decision. Kung makita ho natin kumpleto na ito, automatically approved, no? Declaration of completeness of submitted documents and a directive to the government agency na ilabas niyo yung papel, otherwise kayo po ay maaring makasuhan. So we're sending compliance orders to government agencies to report kung nailabas ho yung papel. But again, as I would say, ito po ay para ilabas yung papel ng government agency. Subalit, it does not exempt the government employee or the head of the office or head of the agency from any liability. Kasi sabi ho doon na yung meron hong trabaho na aprubahan yan, at kung yun ho ang head ng agency o yung head lamang ng isang opisina doon sa ahensya, yung head po ang siyang mananagot doon. So kaya ho, napakahalaga po na matandaan ho natin na hindi ho tayo dapat nagpapabiktima dito sa mga nangiipit ho ng papel, because those applications are automatically approved by operation of law, and we are asking the public, no? Pwede niyo pong ibigay sa amin yan. There are instances naman po na ARTA mismo ang nag-surprise inspection sa agency. We requested all of the pending applications. Nagsabit po sa amin ng 1,000 o 2,000 pending application. Nakita po natin na bayad na, kompleto na. Diniklara po natin yung lahat ng application na yon as automatically approved by operation of law. So, ganun po ang atin pong gawin, at we would be more than happy po na to help each and every one of us. No? So, tandaan po natin yon, automatically approved by operation of law.
Thank you so much, Secretary Belgica, for that discussion on the automatic approval provision of Republic Act 11032, or the Ease of Doing Business and Efficient Government Service Delivery Act of 2018. My next question is directed to DAP President Jojo Caronan. Sir Jojo, hello po.
Hi,
In your
hello, good
presentation
morning.
earlier, you mentioned about future-proofing regulations in a VUCA world, that the government should change its approach. Can you please elaborate more on this? And what are the things that DAP is doing in order to, just name a few na lang po, in order to prepare our government agencies, specifically yung mga regulatory agencies, given that the times now are really uncertain because of the COVID-19 pandemic and a lot of other things.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Siguro dalawang puntos yung gusto kong bigyan ng emphasis. First one is in the process of creating yung regulation. At DAP right now, we are advocating that yung paggawa ng regulations natin should now include the determination of behavioral change. No? Kasi the traditional way of creating policies is simply to enact that particular law or policy and then add some provisions for penalties in case those policies are not met. Sa tingin namin, yun yung mga makalumang pamamaraan ng paggawa ng pulisiya. Ang makabagong paraan ng paggawa ng pulisiya ngayon is to actually consider yung behavior ng tao, because sometimes compliance to a particular law or policy is not determined by the level of penalty that you produce, but by aligning it doon sa behavior ng tao as they actually perform their duties and functions. No? So dapat medyo mas scientific na yung approach natin sa paggawa nito. And also, yung paggawa ng pulisiya, it must be understood from the perspective of the entire system of regulation. Hindi mo pwedeng siyang titingnan doon sa isang regulatory body lang. Dapat makita mo sa kabuuan ng paggawa ng regulasyon. So you must consider the different institutions that are involved in the same process. At lahat ng yun, ika-calibrate mo lahat ng action nila in order to produce the tamang behavior para masundan o masunod yung dapat na mangyari. So, nung una, we at DAP has been advocating yung use ng RIA and everything. But now that this is already institutionalized, we are now moving at a higher level kasi nandyan naman na ang ARTA to make sure that everything is according to law. So ngayon, as far as DAP is concerned, we are now trying to move to a higher principle in trying to design yung policies. Secondly, I would like to emphasize yung fact na the regulatory authority must have a clear identification ng competencies and skills nila. Dapat the regulatory the individuals in charge in enforcement of regulation must consider their functions to be a practice. Kinakailangan ma-consider siya as a professional function kasi that is a way of institutionalizing it at magiging malinaw kung ano yung mga competencies and skills nila. After identifying them or after considering them to be a profession, kinakailangang i-establish natin yung communities of practice. The reason for this is because nagbabago nga palagi yung sistema and there is no single solution to any form of a problem. Maraming mga pamamaraan on how to attack a particular problem. And establishing a communities of practice allows itong mga practitioner ng regulation to share their experiences and so therefore mas lalalim yung kanilang kaalaman on how to approach individual issues on regulation. Yun ang, I think, what is needed at this time. And we at the DAP currently is in talks with, as I mentioned a while ago, the New Zealand government in order to identify these competencies of regulators. And hopefully the agreement will push through para mai-apply na rin natin dito sa Pilipinas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Jojo, President Jojo. I now go back to CenSEI President Ricardo Saludo. No, sir, there is a saying that public discourse shapes public policy. What is the proper way for us to handle the centers, especially if we are introducing a new regulation, a new policy, or a new concept to the public?
The key really is the consultation. I think that you had mentioned. No, now the aim is to really institutionalize the consultation, and here I will refer to two clear examples where that was done. No? One is what the PACC is now doing, the Presidential Anti-Corruption Commission. Your brother DG has set up within I think the Bureau of Customs stakeholders, from private sector at different levels, alerting him if there's a problem. So pag meron ka, and it's personalized, they're there, constantly. So if you have a new regulation, pwede mong ibato muna sa kanila, and then they know exactly what's happening on the ground and can tell you if there's an issue. No. The other example I will cite is something I mentioned earlier in terms of risk management. During the infrastructure program of President Arroyo during her final years, when they really had to rush the program, she also wanted to make sure that in rushing the infrastructure, there would not be any issues with certain stakeholders. No, so she created a sectoral council made up of media. It was the Kapisanan Broadcasters was representing media, the Catholic Church with I think Father Anton Pascual, head of Radio Veritas, there, no, LGUs because somebody from ULAP was there, and business sector, no, PCCI was represented, and one other group, no. So this entity met regularly, looking at the progress of infrastructure and alerting her government if there are issues that come up, no, and it helped to prevent issues. Now, again, that kind of a mechanism, if ARTA has or an agency, any agency has a similar mechanism, pwedeng doon tanungin, no? Then, if you have new regulations, pwedeng ibaturon, and you already have a relationship with them, so they'll be able to. They know where you're coming from. They know what you need to enforce. At the same time, they're aware of their constituency's concerns. Now, a lot of this good thing now, a lot of this can be done through social media. I-Viber mo lang yan, you'll get a lot of reaction. O kaya i-Facebook, no? Of course, it has to be a limited group kasi kung minsan you Viber it to a group and then kakalat yan and they think it's already real, no? It's already happening. So you get a bad reaction in the public, no? But it's good to have a relationship. Now, you mentioned political discourse. Here's the problem with political discourse now. If it goes public, it can be twisted, distorted, it can be politicized. We've seen it, no, on so many issues. And so what happens is the discussion becomes irrational. It becomes emotional, and it's not helpful, no. And even it undercuts regulatory reform, no. So that's why it's important to have a stakeholders group. Na sila muna yung mag-uusap. The moment something that is being planned or even approved goes public without proper, discussion, nowadays it tends to get really overblown, unfortunately. Thank you.
And that's what you meant. Yes, sir. Yes, Sec. Yes, Sec.
Thank you, Secretary Saludo. The one we mentioned earlier about the PBRIS, the Philippine Business Regulation Information System, is really very promising in the way government services should be done. It promotes transparency, accountability, because once fully developed and becomes operational, any regulation, any taxpayer or applicant or even a government agency will be able to know if a particular regulation being implemented by our agency has been subjected to one, proper consultation, or two, RIA. And it will also provide for a platform whereby anyone can make his comment and also ensure that the regulation does not conflict with other regulations. So it's really a very good system, a very platform that provides transparency. It will even provide for a parang a consultation process in a way, because anybody, the public and the government agencies concerned, will be able to know what are concerns, comments raised in the system or platform. So by that, once fully implemented, a government agency implementing a particular regulation will make sure that before it enforces a regulation, that it has been subjected to one proper consultations and RIA, because the public will be enabled to post its comments there in the platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek. And I think Sec Saludo made it clear naman his point earlier regarding what sustains plan changes, no? That dissenters must be kept at bay. The dissenters is referring to yung mga dissenters that post no solutions at all, but they just want to criticize lang din and disrupt the process of proposing better, new, and innovative regulations and solutions to the problems of the country. The next question comes from Joel Tantore from FD Facebook. It's directed to Secretary Jeremiah Belgica. This is in view of the upcoming 2022 elections, provided that the position of the Director General is coterminous with the President. So his question is, how confident are you that the great gains of ARTA will continue and not be discarded by the new DG? Sec?
Well, how confident am I? Well, it really depends doon kasi there's really no guarantee na masasabi natin kung ano yung direction nila. But one thing is for sure, no? The guarantee is number one, the ease of doing business, RA 11032 is a law, no? Batas po yan. So hindi po ito basta-basta mababago. Kung hindi man, ito po mai-improve pa. No, at ang mga implementations po na to, katulad po na sa Central Business Portal, nasa batas din po yan. Ano? So, kung meron man pong mangyayari dyan na baka mabago, ay hopefully ito po ay mas mapaganda pa, the CBP. The automatic approvals are there, so tutuloy po yan. Ang atin pong also, yung atin pong mga regulations na linalabas po, katulad po ng PGRP, yung Philippine Good Regulatory Principles, itong Whole of Government Reengineering Manual, the Regulatory Impact Assessment Manual, all of these things were also approved not only by ARTA, but it was even also endorsed and approved by the Anti-Red Tape Ease of Doing Business Advisory Council, composed of several government agencies. And we also intend to have this presented to the Joint Oversight Committee of Congress and also to the Cabinet. So ito po yung mga thrust ho namin na gawin hong formal na policy at i-institutionalize po ang mga bagay na ito. For one, yung mga tinuturo po natin, ng mga trainings po natin sa mga national government agencies, creation of the committees on anti-red tape, and capacity building on how to use the regulatory impact assessment manual, naririyan na po yan. At hindi na po yan matatanggal sa mga government agencies. So, as much as we can, no, we are institutionalizing all of these things and even adding technology when needed. Katulad po ng Central Business Portal, gamit po ng digital signatures na hopefully next time magkaroon kami ng opportunity to talk about digital signatures and how important it is in the streamlining program of the government, including digital payments that we are actually pushing forth stronger, no, sa darating pong mga panahon. So ayan po, no? So we are confident that ito po ay magpapatuloy, no? Dahil ito po ay programa na po at ito po ay nasa batas.
Thank you, Sec, for your response. And to cap off our open forum for today's webinar, my last question, which is directed to everybody, to all our speakers, how do you think this e-governance bill being pushed by the President affect our regulatory environment? And what are your hopes by the time our lawmakers tackle this bill in their respective chambers? Sec Belgica, do you want to?
I want to answer that. First off, we have to understand one of the main mantra, if I may say, that ARTA has been talking about when it comes to digitalization, digital transformation, is that we cannot automate unless we streamline and re-engineer a process. Hindi ka pwedeng mag-automation, hindi ka pwedeng ilagay mo sa electronic platform ang isang sistema na hindi mo muna in-streamline at re-engineer. Now, to your question on how it affect the e-governance push, how it would affect all of this ginagawa natin ngayon, it will not only affect, but it would actually strengthen it, because everything that we're doing right now in streamlining and re-engineering ultimately would lead to e-governance. When we say e-governance, it's not just electronic governance, but efficient governance. Meron hong mga serbisyo na pwede mong mapadali nang hindi mo naman in-automate. Yan ho, totoo, no? Meron hong mga serbisyo na komportable na kasi yung na-streamline at na-re-engineer mo, pero mas mapapadali mo kapag in-automate mo pa ang streamline process. Kasi kapag inyo pong in-automate or linagay sa digital or electronic platform ang isang sistema na hindi po natin na streamline, ang red tape ho ay papasok ho sa ating automation. So that was happening, that has been happening in the past, no? Kaya marami sa ating mga automation program had to be unbundled again kasi kinakailangan baguhin yung sistema. So the push for the e-governance bills, no, may mga nakapending po diyan, ay malaking bagay po, pero ang nais mo namin sanang mas lalong paitingin, no, na contribution po ng ARTA dito is alongside with that, mas lalo pa ho natin palakasin yung streamlining efforts po ng government offices. Now, also in line with this po, we have already submitted some of our recommendation, ano? Doon ho sa mga nakapending na bill na yan, doon sa creation din po ng national yung smart governance system na plan ng gobyerno. Malaki hong bagay na kasama po ang ARTA doon, sa magka-craft po doon, dahil sabi nga nila, ang automation is the easiest part, but the harder part is the architectural and also the system streamlining, which we are already addressing right now. So it really goes hand in hand, streamlining and automation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sec. From DAP, President Jojo, do you wish to add in the discussion regarding the e-governance bill being pushed by the President po?
Yes, I agree with the statement made by PG Belgica. No? Tama po yun, hindi po tayo pwede mag-automate unless we streamline first. Otherwise, you simply automate a non-streamlined process. So medyo maling ano yun, polisiya. But in addition to that, ang kagandahan ng pag-adapt ng e-government is because we now reduce yung sources ng red tape and corruption, which is yung too much discretionary authority is given to so many people. Kapag we adapt the e-governance system, so many of these processes na discretionary becomes ministerial. In fact, it becomes automatic. So in that regard, therefore, we will be reducing red tape as well as corruption.
Thank you, Sir Jojo, President Jojo of DAP. Ma'am Christy from the ICT, do you wish to add in the discussion, ma'am, regarding the e-governance bill? Ma'am?
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Good morning again. DICT is in full support of the government's e-governance. So we are here to provide the technology platform, but we will be behind the scene, because right now the policy change, the streamlining of processes will be the agencies, different agencies, mandate. So, but right now, we continue to support this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Christy. And Sec Rick from CenSEI, sir.
Yeah. In principle, it's of course a wonderful idea, and in fact, I would also say this will empower many people. You know, one of the things that's happening now, there is greater and greater financial inclusion. Why? Because of electronic mobile payments and electronic mobile banking. So many people are actually able to, access the financial system when before they could not, simply by using a phone. So the same thing will happen to government with e-governance. Those through cell phones, ordinary people, more and more people will be able to access it. But I agree completely with Secretary Belgica that you have to streamline the process first before you automate. And part of the reason is that to automate a complicated process takes more computing resources than to automate a simpler process. So yun no? If you're automating something that's complex and convoluted, that becomes a computer system nightmare. Now, the other thing, and very important, is that the organizational side of regulatory reform has to be put in place. The organization must be ready to work with the electronic system. They're used to things getting to them on paper. They now have to go online and check things, purely online. Walang no paper. No? So the organization, this is what we talked about earlier. No? Organizationally, you have to then work to make sure they are able to work with the systems. No? And then we will stress something again mentioned by other speakers: risk management. If everything is by computer, risk management can be more challenging, no? Because things move fast and things can go wrong very quickly. No? Kasi it's all happening electronically. No, we've seen that where something goes viral and it goes crazy. No, so very important to put in risk management systems in the computer system. And by the way, that includes cybersecurity. The Philippines, unfortunately, is notorious for having the biggest cybersecurity breach ever, when 56 million voter information was hacked at the COMELEC, no, back in 2016. No, so we have, and now there's more and more of this is happening. So we have to ensure that risk management is properly attended to. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. And that concludes our open forum and the entire webinar brought to you by the Office of the Director General of the Anti-Red Tape Authority, led by Secretary Jeremiah B. Belgica. This has been the future-proofing of regulations. I'm your host, Ria Fernandez. But before I finally let each one of you go, pabalik lang doon sa slide ng Viber community natin. So I really implore each one of you to please join our growing Viber community by just scanning the QR code that you are now seeing on your screens. And with that, you will get the latest updates straight from the Anti-Red Tape Authority. Latest issuances, memoranda, press releases, and many other information. And go to the next slide, Vince. Those who earlier asked me for copies of the presentations of our speakers, you may access the files through this link bit.ly or bit.ly/ARTA Future Proofing Webinar. And please answer the feedback form, which is readily available in the bit.ly/ARTA Future Proofing Feedback. And after accomplishing that feedback form, we will be able to send you the electronic certificate for attending this half-day webinar brought to you by ARTA ODG. Maraming salamat po. Again, I am Ria Fernandez from the ARTA Public Relations Unit on behalf of the ARTA Office of the Director General. Maraming salamat po muli and hanggang sa muli at sa susunod naming webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Salamat po sa lahat.
Salamat po. Thank you, everyone.
Sec, thank you, Secretary.
Thank you. And I posted our information, contact information again for those who are interested. Yan po, no, with a cell phone number. Thank you.
President Jojo, thank you.
Thank you, DICT.
Thank you, Jojo. Salamat. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
joining us.
Secretary.
Ria, thank you for excellent hosting. And thank you, Yusek Perez, for your presentation. Talagang ang daming ginagawa ng ARTA. Terrific.